What was the most horrible city that you've ever been to, and why was it so bad? This was written in 2012. Karachi, Pakistan. I saw malnourished children wandering a field of garbage, eating whatever was edible from the multi-acre pile of waste. I saw all manner of crippled children, teenagers, adults, and the elderly begging for the equivalent of 20 cents on the streets to stay away from starvation. More than one cried when I gave them money. I heard of my aunt's friend whose life savings were stolen from her as she walked out of the bank. She was making a deposit on a flat. She was robbed at weapon point and then chased the thieves for a mile down busy streets, screaming and crying for someone to help her as people made room for them to pass. My cousin worked there as a reporter for a brief period and did an article on the Hijra. They were essentially trans or eunuchs who begged and extorted money, basically to get them to stop hounding you. There was a man who was kidnapped by them, locked in a basement to a chair for 3 days and repeatedly beaten with a board with nails in it. He was given a choice, to have his manhood cut off and become a Hijra himself, or be killed there in the chair. He eventually befriended one who allowed him breaks without supervision, and he escaped through a window. He then ran to the nearest rickshaw driver, got him to drive away, and then broke down and told him his story. The driver then gave him a free ride to the hospital. I saw a basic lack of any city planning. Highways interlaced neighborhoods, so the only way to get to your house from a bus stop was to jaywalk across a road with a speed limit of 65 kilometers per hour. I had to engage in this myself a few times when visiting relatives. I saw an unrivaled level of pollution and littering. During rush hour, the streets downtown had a visibility of 20 to 30 feet. The streets stank of smog and burned your eyes. The streets themselves were littered with all manner of plastics, human filth, and miscellaneous detritus. People didn't seem to use garbage cans. It was commonplace to throw garbage on the streets. There was also no visible form of garbage disposal. Garbage was just piled at street corners and burned. Ugh, that stench. I will never forget that smell. I could go on for a while. I stayed there for a period of 2 months while I was 13. My parents were with me in the first 2 weeks, but had to go back to their real lives. I elected to stay with relatives that I'd never met before and really soak up the culture. It was a blast, but I'll never go back to that terrifying city. I almost died a couple of times, and to go back now I would much more likely die. For those that want to see what Karachi is like, Vice did a story on it. The most interesting is part 5, where they interview an accomplished hitman. Well, at least this first story starts off strong on our expected theme. I'll say that there is a really interesting mix of first and third world countries coming up, and the way people seem to have interpreted their worst city is quite broad, so stay tuned. Raxaul, Bihar in northeast India. Been there for more than a month working in a hospital. Electricity for around 6 hours a day, rivers are black and contain more plastic than water, and you weren't allowed to visit anything on your own, including the surrounding villages, because they'd kidnap or rob you with homemade firearms. Almost everyone lived in filth. Involuntary electrocutions coming into the hospital every day because people would just try to steal electricity with live wires hanging around everywhere. Every rain would flood the streets and the filth would come out of the rivers because there were no sewers. Nice people though, except those that would threaten to kill our midwives or doctors because they claimed that their wife gave birth to a son, not a daughter, which happened several times in 5 weeks. You go over the border to Nepal, just 1 mile away, and voila, paradise. Not compared to many other places, but definitely compared to Raxaul. In Nepal, I really learned to appreciate concrete streets, cars, nice shops, even though they sold only replicas, of course, and garbage disposal. Back to Raxaul. Extremely corrupt government and clerks in general in that state. The Indians we talked to on our flight, who were very friendly and communicative like almost all Indians, although they really seemed to like fibbing without bad intent. They asked us where we were headed and we told them Bihar. They were shocked and tried to convince us otherwise. We did see some of Nepal and northern India after our visit to Raxaul, and it indeed was generally much more pleasant, although experiencing something like this, even for just a month, really changes your perspective on humans and what matters in life in general. Oh, and the villages around Raxaul looked like something straight out of a Help Starving Children commercial. 20 clay and straw huts, some oxen, some paths, some rice fields, children in various states of undress everywhere. The hospital staff sent out 3 or 4 doctors and nurses on tour each week to try and teach their children basic reading and math. Most of the inhabitants, certainly all the women, had never in their life been as far away from their villages as Raxaul, which is around 5 to 10 miles away. In some villages, the girls were supposedly married at 14 and had to stay in their clay hut until they gave birth to their firstborn. Although that's just what the veterans there told me. They didn't speak English, and my Hindi was rudimentary, so I couldn't even ask them. Also, something I just remembered and need to get out. Right when we were there, The hospital had some sort of special sterilization month. It was just 300 rupees for women, men would never do that there, and 50 if they could prove that they were too poor to pay the 300. In 2005, 50 rupees were less worth than a dollar or euro. Interesting fact, the surgeons usually sewed the skin layer with sterilized fishing lines because they were so much cheaper than surgical-grade sewing material. Don't blame them, the more people they can treat, the better. Pattaya, Thailand. Most Westerners here are greasy, overweight brothel tourists. It's full of poor women from the north who come there out of desperation to get involved with the trade. It tries to maintain an aura of glamour and allure, but everything about it is tawdry. Pattaya is honestly the worst beach city you can go to. It's filled with fat, randy Russian men trying to do the deed with an oriental girl. Ugh. But I can assure you that the rest of Thailand isn't that bad, and there are some amazing beach towns and cities out there. Basildon, Essex in the UK. The one time I went there, I was offered certain acts by what looked like a drunk, malnourished teenager before I'd even left the multi-story car park. When I told her to get lost, she reassured me that it was okay, she had rubbers. The town is little more than an endless parade of inbreds and drunken teenage mums in tracksuits. Screw everything about that place. It's definitely Camden, New Jersey for me. I've been to some crappy places around the world, including Palestinian areas where you really weren't supposed to be there, and legitimately crappy parts of Philly. Not from the, I'm from a quiet suburb and the Temple area is scary to me. I mean the actual north of Philly. I've never felt as uncomfortable in an immediate, self-preserving sort of way as I was in Camden. It's a perfectly fine city if you just take the speed line over to certain places. A few of the destinations are innocuous, like the aquarium, the Tweeter Center, a few things like that. But certain areas, man. I once got lost driving around Camden. It was the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of the week, 1 p.m. on a Tuesday if I recall correctly, and there were people loitering on either side of a large street. As I stopped at a light, they just casually started shambling towards my car. I mean, not trying to sneak up out of my line of sight or even sprint forward to catch me off guard. This was a decent-sized group of people, a handful from either side, just casually stumbling towards my car. It was like a zombie movie. I felt like I was in a scary movie. I ended up running the red light before they reached me. I'm a big dude and I've been mugged at weapon point more than once. I'm not a squeamish guy. But at that moment, I was really like, I'm not ready for this city. Psychologically, this is something I ain't ready to swallow. I was living in Philly and I decided I was tired of paying rent. I looked online and saw a house in Camden for $5,000. So I drove my car down there to check it out. I look at the place and realize it's worse than a dump right off the bat. The siding was all ripped off and the neighborhood was burnt out. But when I got out of the car, I looked up at the attic windows and a guy was just looking at me. We make eye contact and he disappears from the window like a ghost. I got the heck out of there. I've been all around Camden in my urban exploration phase though, and never got robbed. I was probably just lucky. Camden, New Jersey. The city is littered with working girls, substance use, and abandoned buildings. It's pretty sad, really. Camden used to be a thriving city. People from Philadelphia would go to Camden for its shops and nightlife. It was the birthplace of many industries, including RCA and Campbell. Since the 1950s, the population has plummeted more than 40% from 120,000 to the current level of around 70,000. And 40% of the 70,000 are currently unemployed. The story of the downfall is an interesting read, and if you guys have any time, I encourage you to check it out. Camden. It's like Gotham without Batman. You know, I kind of figured that certain cities would be making repeat appearances in this video, but my money was nowhere near it being Camden, New Jersey, and it being mentioned twice sequentially is ridiculous. Although I'm limited in my travels, my money would have been on Birmingham being the first reprising city from a first world country. Sorry, Brummies. Mogadishu, Somalia. I'm currently living and working in Mogadishu as a humanitarian worker. When I first saw this question, I thought, well, that's an easy answer, but thought it'd be kinda cheating to suggest it. That being said, I don't know what to write that would be at all surprising to anyone. Main reasons to be listed as #1 worst city would be the city being in complete ruins, most neighborhoods being controlled by militia, assassinations and indiscriminate killings being commonplace, multiple IED attacks a week, rampant police and military corruption, kidnappings of foreigners, Sharia law, mutilation of private parts, and a few other things. Overall, good times. Nikel, Russia. Murmansk is close second, though. With a little bit of cleaning up on the sides of buildings, I think that Murmansk could actually look quite nice. Isn't Nikel the place that has so much pollution that they want to start mining the soil for minerals that came down from the pollution? You know, sometimes I hate my town, and then I see comments like that make me so freaking glad I don't live anywhere else. Port-au-Prince, Haiti is pretty terrible, and I went there before the earthquake. Urine running through the streets, burning piles of trash, kids no more than 3 begging you for food. Not a pleasant experience. Most people I met in Haiti were quite nice though, so that makes up for it a little. The Haitians are great, but Port-au-Prince is the worst place I've ever been, and I've traveled quite a bit. I know there are worse places in the world, but if you're in the UK, don't go to Croydon. I wonder how many folk are just stating their hometowns. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Tijuana. Let me dip my paintbrush in raw feces and paint you a picture. It's actually difficult to determine where the city ends and the dump begins. Hint, the dump has burned horse carcasses. There's dust and trash everywhere. People's houses are made out of scavenged garbage. Most of the buildings look like the builders got fired halfway through the job. There's so much dust that even the sky has a crappy brownish hue. On every barbed wire fence, there must have been thousands of raggedy plastic shopping bags just flapping in the wind. Blackpool, England. Whilst driving through, I got my windshield smashed by a 10-year-old hoodie. Djibouti. Worst city in Africa, 15 miles from the Somali border, and it smells like crap. The only thing there is a massive army base and a fueling stop for naval vessels. Stockton, California. Just depressing. I freaking knew this would be here. Gateshead. It's like a city from Fallout. Basically, me and my parents were curious and in Newcastle, so we took the metro across the Type to Gateshead, and we were not very impressed. Leaving a friend's dormitory in Camden and waiting for the bus, I was approached by 2 police cars. They demanded I get in the back of their car and they'd escort me to a neighboring town where I could take another bus home. That night, someone was murdered a few feet from where I was waiting. As someone who's lived 5 minutes from Camden my whole life, I can say this is 100% accurate. I was driving through Camden once, I can't remember why, and I was pulled over by the cops so that they could tell me to drive out of there as fast as possible and that they'd escort me. I drive a 95 Jeep Wrangler. Imagine someone in a Mercedes. Pallet Town. Nothing to do there, and my neighbor is a jerk. I don't know, I got a free Bulbasaur from there. I thought it was alright. Holy crap, Detroit, Michigan, are you kidding me? That place all around just reeks of broken dreams and heartbreak. Yeah, I've been in worse cities in Michigan. I've driven and walked around a lot of Detroit, but I'm more scared of Flint or Saginaw, the city itself, than anywhere in Detroit. I've been shot at in Flint and Saginaw multiple times. Detroit, I feel safer. But overall, there were like small 40-person towns in Jamaica that I drove through on my way from the airport to Negril. I can't help but feel like crying when I look back on it that these people literally had nothing but a metal container, like a shipping crate to call a home. And if a hurricane took that away, they'd all die young. God damn it. I clicked on this thread and kept thinking, don't be Detroit, don't be Detroit, don't be Detroit, as it loaded. Detroit is not that bad. I feel like people who don't live in the metro Detroit have a good understanding of it. It's not the best city by any means, but there's no way it's the worst city worldwide. Bakersfield, the armpit of California. My visit consisted of getting lost and seeing an undressed man passed out at 2 in the afternoon, numerous working girls, the creepiest bars I've ever seen, and a dead dog lying on the side of the freeway. Good times. Mogadishu, Somalia. Between 2006 and 2007, you had the Islamic Courts Union fighting the transitional federal government, led by the self-proclaimed president Yusuf Ahmed. They were fighting close combat in the city blocks in the south, while Ethiopian army rained artillery fire from the west. Also, US Navy gunships were giving air support to them, taking out entire buildings. Complete chaos in the streets, no one really knew who was fighting who, dead bodies everywhere. By far one of the worst moments in my life. Our houses had a giant stone wall around them, and my father and uncles were guarding it with AKs and 9mm, yelling to everyone who approached, "Who the frick are you? If we don't know you, we'll shoot you." And they only let in people they knew and women and children. I was 16 and they gave me a gat and told me to get inside and unloaded anyone who wasn't escorted by them. They said I and 5 other cousins were the last line of defense for the 35 women and children inside. Lucky for me, we all survived and I didn't have to demonstrate my sweet Call of Duty skills. There was a small arms exchange between my father and a few lost soldiers. I'm not sure who they belonged to, but luckily nobody was hit. Also, the south side of the wall was hit by artillery, leaving a 4-meter gap and taking down a part of the roof in the back rooms. Don't get me wrong, it was already a crappy city, but the end of 2006 got it really messed up. I was born of 1989 in Mogadishu and lived there until I was 9. The Civil War started in 1989 and had been going on ever since, with some moments of relative peace. So when I visited in 2006, tensions rose and all heck broke loose very fast. And there's our second city with multiple appearances. I don't think you get a prize for that honor though. And I will say it's probably a little unfair to claim a place as the worst city during the literal bombardment and civil war in such a place, although Mogadishu by a lot of accounts is still a bit harrowing, to put it lightly. Fresno, California. Runner-up, Blackpool, UK. Blackpool's truly terrifying, innit? Not only is it crap in itself, but the people there seem to have got stuck at some point halfway through evolution. Paris, France. Screw that city. I had some time to spare while waiting for my train to Madrid in Paris, decided to go to the Eiffel Tower, took the classic pics and stuff, grabbed a cab back to the train station, and the cabbie did the following. Took a pee in the street, got into a fight with a fellow driver that cut him, insulted some people in turbans that were selling stuff, got into another fight, took me to the wrong place and got mad with me when I showed him a picture of where I wanted to go, got pulled over by the cops for apparently doing business in an illegal way, the cops interviewed me, and finally took me to the station. Parisians are, well, interesting. Delhi, India. I've lived in LA most of my life and was totally unprepared for the amount of pollution in Delhi. I was there for 10 days, and visibility at best was about 2 miles, after which everything disappears into the brown mist. People litter everywhere and don't think twice about it. I was dumbfounded to see empty trash cans surrounded by trash. It's not the kind of city a foreigner can blend in, and you're constantly hounded by beggars, and almost everyone tries charging you 3 to 20 times the normal rate. Cutting in line is the norm. You can literally be speaking with a cashier and someone will squeeze their head between your face and the hole in the window through which you were speaking to the cashier without a second thought. Traveling in cars there is torturous. The worst traffic I've ever seen. People signal only with their horn. Making a left, honk your horn. Going through an intersection, honk your horn. Someone in the way, honk. You're surrounded by hundreds of cars, mostly rickshaws, all of which are just constantly honking. People drive both ways on both sides of the roads, which is scary as heck. The smell. Nothing ever seems to be finished there, and when it is, all the refuse and leftover material is right next to the site. The police and military, I'm not sure which, all have automatic weapons and they will also extort you for whatever they can. Open sewage troughs, sickening disparity of wealth living side by side, opulent, luxurious hotels butting up against shanties, with guards and walls surrounding the hotels. Crowded, long lines, no beef, street food looks delicious but will make you viciously sick. Did I miss anything? I enjoyed my visit though, granted me perspective that I didn't have before. I felt the exact same way about Delhi and India in general. I think the worst part was not being mentally prepared for the sickening amount of poverty. Being constantly approached and blocked by beggars was depressing and exhausting. It's also hands down the smelliest place I've ever been to. I could still smell India on my clothes even after getting home and going through multiple washes. It was an amazing, eye-opening experience though. Cleveland. But I heard that it's not Detroit, so it has that going for it. West Dayton, Ohio. Cheapest down-under kisses in America. My brother is a Dayton cop, and I once asked him where in Dayton I should avoid, and he circled the entire map of Dayton. Manila, the Philippines. I've been to many countries, but between the world's crappiest airport, the traffic, the con artists everywhere, the humidity, and just the lack of beauty in the city, this one ranks up there. Corpus Christi, Texas is where dreams go to die. It smells a lot, it rains a lot, and there's nothing to do except huff paint. I raise you Kingsville, Texas. That was so bad we went to Corpus to have fun. I lived in Rough and Ready, California for a while. They separated from the Union during the Civil War. The town was mostly trailer parks, and about once monthly a trailer would blow up due to a crystal lab going wrong inside. Paris, France. Sure, the sightseeing is nice, but everything else is horrible. The whole place stinks like pee and sewers. Food and drinks are ridiculously overpriced. There are muggers and salesmen who force you to give them your money after strapping an elastic band on your hand. Not a fan of the urban culture at all. It's a beautiful city ruined by its own inhabitants. I remember just giving up and not eating while I was in Paris. I starved because I was sad and couldn't order food properly without teeing people off. Waiters refused to take my money and serve me because I mispronounced something. and grocery store clerks glared at me. I've never had a more difficult time exchanging money for food than when I was in Paris. When I did eat food and drink wine, it was not impressive at all. I was starving so badly that I promptly left and traveled to other cities in the world that impressed me much more. Detroit, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, and Cleveland, Ohio make up a triangle-shaped belt buckle on the Rust Belt. Toledo, Ohio is like a little crap turd stud in the center. Bucharest is the saddest city in Europe, I'm sure. It's full of stray dogs and seems to have an all-around bleak feeling to it. Riverside, California. A little desert town with nothing to do, no future, and average temps of 100+ degrees. And so much pollution, it's like breathing in glass. Though I've been convinced that it's really a conspiracy to make global warming worse in order to make the town a beachfront property. Is it cheating to name an entire country? Because I once took a trip to the Dominican Republic. It was frickin' miserable. From the airport to the resort, I saw nothing but misery and poverty. Third world nation. All along the streets were shacks and shanties. Dead donkey in the middle of the roadway rotting away. Working girls all over the place. And some of them were clearly minors. It was just depressing. The resort was nice, but whenever you left that false bubble of paradise, it was just so depressing. Screw all of you routing these US cities. True terror is witnessing a major city in any frickin' third world country. Miserable as heck. To be fair, the thread is what's the worst city you've been to, not the worst city in the world. Not a lot of people holiday in Karachi or Lagos, even though they're obviously far worse than Detroit or Gary, so they're not going to get mentioned as often. Chernobyl. Place is a dump. I thought it was a blast. Los Angeles, California. Superficial and fake. It's not about who you are or what you can do, but how many names you can drop in a conversation. Even the janitors brag about whose toilets they've cleaned.
Redditors who have walked in on their significant other cheating. What were the next 30 minutes like? I walked in and she was acting very nervous. She also wouldn't let me walk to the room. It clicked and I got literal tunnel vision. Such a strange sensation. I don't remember too much, but the outer edges of my vision were black and I can only hear my own breathing. I guess I pushed her aside like she was a broom. Thankfully didn't hurt her. Then I went into the room and realized he was in the bathroom. What I remember is that I opened the door like a regular person. The broken door and her account say that I Hulk smashed the door open with my fist. I grabbed him and calmly escorted him out of the house without saying a word. He was bawling like a 12-year-old girl. I closed the front door, turned around, and told her she had an hour to get all of her stuff and leave. I watched SportsCenter until she was gone. I didn't walk in, but I was helping her study and grabbed her phone from between us to Google something. I was immediately greeted with a long string of explicit text with her just friend. I set her phone down and left without a word. I sat in the fetal position beside my car in the parking deck for a good hour before I could even process it. We broke up later that day. She married him less than a year later, and they're divorced now. No happy endings for anyone in that story. I was pretty much trembling and wasn't capable of talking, just holding my tears. My hands were a bit shaky too. I wanted nothing but silence. One of the worst feelings ever. Didn't walk in. Caught him leaving as I went over the next morning to drop something off. She was in her skimpy nightwear kissing him goodbye. First thing that actually flashed across my mind was, I gotta get out of here or things are gonna go down. I was suddenly aware how I have anger issues, and that got a concealed carry license, and that I was carrying a loaded gun at that very moment. Looked at his smug face. Looked at her panicked face. Looked at his smug face again. Turned and left. Climbed on my bike and sped off. I never rode as fast, as recklessly, or as furiously as that time. I actually think I was trying to off myself. I did crash the bike. I was in such a murderous rage that I kept thinking faster for some reason. I entered a curve way too fast and slipped while leaning trying to make it. I got up, realized I was messed up, then kept walking into the middle of nowhere. I sat in a clearing and remained there until a policeman found me. I told him what had happened and handed him my gun, telling it was best he had used it because I felt the thing was demanding to be used. It was just my anger at the time. Police officer was sympathetic, drove me to the hospital and called a tow for the bike. The ride to the ER, I got to chatting with he and his partner. 10 minutes go by and we're all laughing our butts off lost in random conversation. Me and those guys are good friends to this day, and in many shenanigans we have been involved since. Regarding her, I never bothered to check. TLDR, got cheated on, gained best friends after trying to endanger self. I'm glad this one at least had a happy ending. Calmly went to the hardware store and bought all new locks for the doors. When I got home, she was already there. Kicked her out, changed locks. This is the manliest response I've ever heard. I was pretty much just shaking and stunned, so I walked my bike home and just went, huh, well that sucks. She kept trying to call the house phone, but I wasn't answering. It was surreal. I reacted like, okay, I'll wait in the living room while you finish. 3 days later, I utterly lost my crap. Still haven't found it. I didn't walk in on it happening, but I saw it coming and did everything I could to stop it, including telling my girlfriend that if the woman I suspected her having a thing with came to my apartment when I wasn't there, it was over between us. She constantly told me nothing was happening between them, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. When I was out of state for a funeral a week later, I went through the Google Home app and noticed recordings of the Google Home speaker being used after midnight. I listened to them and heard the recordings of my now ex-girlfriend and the other woman using my Google Home. I came back 4 days later, had this on my chest for 4 days, and asked my girlfriend as we laid in bed next to each other if anyone came to the apartment while I was gone. She looked me in the eyes and said no. I said again, was girl's name in my apartment while I was home for a funeral. She continued looking me in the eyes, laying inches away from me, and said no. I picked up my phone and played the Google Home recording and asked her, then who the heck is this? She was a deer in the headlights. She couldn't speak for 5 minutes. I told her she was a liar, a manipulator, and a freaking coward, and told her to get the heck out. She left her Facebook open on my laptop I let her use for school. 4 years and an engagement. During the affair, I paid her taxes and paid to remove her wisdom teeth, all while she screwed the guy I didn't need to worry about in our bed. In our room I paid rent for. It really felt like getting hit by a bus. I couldn't breathe, threw up multiple times, and finally slept when I passed out drunk. Found out he was cheating on me for 4 months while he was miles away. I was just angry as heck and punched a wall in my house. The morning after I found out, I went to work and I asked my boss to transfer me to another state. A few weeks after going to another state, I met the love of my life, and we now have a puppy and are getting a house together. Wife of 6 years got a new job in medical device sales and was out of town for 3 weeks straight for training. The first 2 weeks went okay, but she had never traveled before, so it was difficult on both of us. I have several friends who work in the industry, and they all pretty much paint the same picture. Lots of alcohol, lots of hooking up. It's okay, not my wife. She would never. But the next time we spoke, she could tell something was wrong. She had been talking about this guy quite a bit in our conversations, so I asked about him. Oh, he's nobody, just another rep from another state in training with her. Regardless, that afternoon, I got a text from him, explaining that my wife had told him that I was asking about him, and he decided to text me to reassure me that he was married, had 3 kids, nothing was going on. I bought it. And then, the night before she comes home, it happens. 4 a.m., I get a phone call from her, but in my slumber, I sent it to voicemail. She was absolutely wasted and had drunkenly dialed my phone instead of his and left a voicemail. The voicemail consisted of explicit details of their intimate encounters that week, and since they will be traveling together in the future, the continuation of more intimate encounters were promised, including details on how she loved it when he did X to her Y and Z. I got out of bed, walked down the hallway to our daughter's rooms, 2 and 4 at the time, grabbed both of them, and brought them to bed with me. I held them tight while they slept on each side of me, while I cried the remainder of the night. Not for me, but for them, because their world was going to get turned upside down in less than 12 hours from now. I then got out of bed, logged onto her computer, and, after a little investigative sleuthing, I forwarded every iMessage, every picture as well as the voicemail she drunkenly sent me to his wife. So to clarify a few things, this is a throwaway account, so any questions regarding 5-day-old account, etc. are because of that. First of all, thank you for the support, fellow Redditors. This happened a while ago and I moved on. It still hurts. I still haven't come to trust anyone fully yet, but really, I have no interest. I'm only 36, so I'm just having fun working on being a better me. Regarding paying support, even though she makes twice I do, I pay support because it's my duty to my kids, regardless of what she makes. I'm not hurting for cash, not by any means, and neither is she. And yes, the court system is heavily flawed and biased towards mothers. In cases like this, the girls should be living with me. But again, thank you for being awesome, Reddit. Fun story. I'm a bit late to the party, but I'll share anyway. Had a buddy that I had not seen for a while come to town. We were going to meet up and go drinking, but I ended up having to close because someone called in sick. Buddy goes out and parties all night. I tell him to call if he needs a ride. Get the call at about 3 a.m. to come get him at some chick's house. He gives me the address and it's my girlfriend's address. She lives with her sister, so I thought he went home with the sis. I walk in the house and head to my significant other's bedroom, and guess who's there? My buddy. Should have seen the look on her face, and it was priceless. Buddy asks what's going on. I tell him, let's go, and tell her to kindly screw off. She's crying, and Buddy is starting to get the picture. Tell him she was my friend of about 5 months. He feels terrible and is apologizing profusely. I tell Home we're even if he buys me breakfast. So we go get breakfast. I look at it as he did me a favor, nothing to feel bad about. TLDR, caught my buddy diddling my girlfriend, made him buy me breakfast. I can't help but laugh at this one because there are a lot of factors that I don't really know about, but it makes so much sense to have this kind of attitude after finding out about this. If she had did this to you, screw her. No reason to keep her around. She was doing him a favor. She was telling him straight up that she didn't think he was worth it. And honestly, she isn't worth it. Massive W to this man. Went on a brunch date after staying the night at her place. Some Irish dude was flirting with her while we ate and drank. I got up to take a dump and smoke a cig. I'm halfway through my smoke when she walked out the door holding hands with the dude from the bar. I wasn't even mad. Even waved as she left. I calmly sent a text saying we were done, which she didn't respond to until the next day. Apparently, I was overreacting, according to her. I laughed, hung up on her, then left to join my friends on the week-long camping trip we had planned. Again, more responses from the dudes that are nothing short of based. I love this. Kinda late to the party, but here's my story. Was with my girlfriend for 3.5 years. She spent a weekend with her friend. I trusted her because at the time it was my longest relationship and I didn't have a reason not to trust her. I didn't walk in on her, but one day she mentioned how she wanted to go see him again. The next morning I said, "Hey, can I use your phone to call my dad? Mine is messing up." I went through her messages and he said, "I loved the way you blew me," along with a bunch of other stuff. I walked back in the room, woke her up and said, "We're done." I felt crappy at first for going through her phone because it was wrong, then went to my best friend's house and got drunk and played video games. It was actually a pretty fun day after that. My ex before that cheated on me with the roommate we had move in with us. I was downstairs watching TV and heard them in the bedroom. I knocked on the door and she pretty much told me to screw off. I moved out the same day into my friend's place. Got drunk and played video games. Every girlfriend I've ever had has cheated on me. Video games haven't though. Not quite the ask, of course, but similar. My ex always stayed up way later than me because of his shift patterns, so I'd gone to bed around midnight and he was up watching TV. For whatever reason, I couldn't sleep well that night and was in and out for a couple of hours. About 2 a.m., I hear the bedroom door slowly open and I'm about to ask him if he's coming to bed when I realize he's just standing there in the doorway. I'm guessing he couldn't see that I was awake in the darkness. Then, he inches the door shut so it doesn't make a noise. I hear him put on his shoes and the front door slowly, carefully open and close. He came back around 4 a.m. to me sitting on the sofa and just about crapped his pants that I was awake. I just knew, and his reaction confirmed it. We broke up that night, but he was never brave enough to admit to that occasion of cheating or the dozens more that came before it. That I had to find out from others. Then, because we just signed a tenancy agreement, I had to live with him for almost a full year. Best year ever. This was so long ago that it is almost funny to think about because it made me a better person. I truly believe that. In college, scumbag boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was in town and we were all at a party together. They were from the same hometown and had a lot of mutual friends. I got too drunk and left. He told me he was staying and would come over in an hour. I had a lot of friends there too who were keeping an eye out. I got home and immediately got a call from a friend that they snuck off together to his apartment. We lived in the same complex, so it was about a 4-minute walk away. I sprinted back to his place, my best friend sprinting after me, walked into his room to see them, best friend runs in and punches the girl in the face. All pretty much a blur after that. Some yelling, crying, punching a wall, then just went home and cried a bunch. About 10 years later, wouldn't trade it for anything. Sobering experience and made me stronger. Unfortunately, this user paints a less exciting picture. It was like time stopped, like in a Wes Anderson movie. Everything was slow motion. He was passed out naked in his bed with some chick who told me to close the door. His housemate was rambling something frantically in front of me, but I was not there. I remember getting into the car and driving to a park, sitting in the driver's seat until I burst into tears. It was incredibly disassociated. It broke my heart, but I wasn't conscious when it happened. I related to a deep cut. There's a few moments of nothing until the blood starts to pour out uncontrollably and the excruciating pain starts. Not the crazy story others have, but went to visit her on my lunch break while she was visiting her family. I was in high school at the time and we had been dating for almost a year, so it might inform the story later. Her mother informs me she's at a friend's house up the street, so I go and check. It's the guy I've suspected for a while, and I ask if she's there. She answers the door in a skimpy tank top and short shorts and immediately starts crying when she sees me. I walk away, not even being bothered to care at this point since it has been building for like 3 months. She follows, crying, telling me it isn't what it looks like, and at one point falls down onto the grass. I walk to my car and tell her she has 1 hour to drop off everything my family has let her use/given her before she will vacate her stuff from my house, and I drive home. She shows up, gives over everything including car keys, house key, and other items. I was basically supporting her distancing herself from them. She leaves and I take the rest of the day off in a haze. That's about the end. I am kind of a distant person in general, so the emotional part wasn't the biggest issue until it hit later in the day. This is a little confusing due to how many people are involved. I'll try to make it easy. So I wasn't the one that walked in on them. It was the drummer of my band. He was living with the guy my girlfriend cheated on me with. He, drummer, called me and told me, then said, "I'm on my way to your apartment to pack up your stuff." I contacted my mom and told her I need to move back home for a little bit. She was more than happy. She hated my girlfriend, so while my GF was still sleeping in bed with her screw buddy, I was home packing up everything. Best part was, she didn't have a job, so it was literally everything. I had it all moved out before she even got home. She had no idea why I moved, because, unknown to her and her screw buddy, my drummer was there the whole time. His car was at the shop, so someone else brought him home. They thought he was gone for the night. Long story short, she started dating an even different guy a few weeks later and called me drunk one night asking me to sleep with her. I didn't, but I made sure word got to her new boyfriend. Also, our favorite TV show together was Lie to Me, so I made sure that when I moved out, I hid all the DVDs of the show around the apartment for her to find. That alone made me feel a little better. Hope this wasn't too confusing. Dude, hiding the DVDs, that's a respectable kind of petty. Didn't walk in on, but my then boyfriend called and asked me to drop off his phone at his work. I go to retrieve the phone and it vibrated, so I looked to see who it was. Found all sorts of communication from a woman that is not safe for work. This was back in 2008 and my ex had a flip phone. I snapped it in half and threw it out. Wasn't a walk-in, but I still love telling this story because in hindsight, it's pretty freaking funny how horrendous this situation was. Was on and off with someone for years. She had commitment issues, to me at least. All of a sudden, we're talking more often for a few weeks. She seems more serious and wants to take a trip with me. We take a ferry ride out to this secluded island off the west coast of Florida to camp for a few days. Has a beach and bike trail. Second day we're there, I get a really long text from some random number, and it turns out she's been screwing her ex, guy she was dating in between our on and off, while talking to me. What's worse, she got him to watch her dog while her and I were on this trip. He was suspicious about how she had been acting, so we went through her texts on her MacBook and found out she was with me. Believe it or not, it gets even worse. The ferry that took us to this island wouldn't be back for another full 24 hours, so we had to stay another night there. I got bitten up by bugs that night, and then we awkwardly packed up all our crap the next afternoon and drove 2 hours back home together the next day, hardly speaking in that period. She dropped me off and drove to deal with her ex, and I never spoke to her again. Silver lining, I'm now happily married to the love of my life, and it's definitely not this woman. In my mid-20s, I was living with someone I'd been in love with for years. He said he loved me, but didn't want to commit and was interested in a polyamorous lifestyle. I did what I could to give him time to figure out what he wanted. We did everything together for 2 years. Traveled to Europe, went on vacations every couple months. We'd meet women online together and bring them home for crazy intimacy parties. My sex drive was off the charts back then, and I didn't really care if it was a guy or a girl helping get me off. We did a lot of crazy experimentation together. To this day, he knows more about me than any other person, and vice versa. Eventually, my self-esteem and sanity began to wear thin. Our relationship broke down. He'd begun to bring around one of our former playthings more and more. He'd always told me that I didn't need to worry about her because he wasn't really interested in her. It was just intimacy, and loved me most. Anyway, it came to the point where I needed to leave. I found an apartment with some friends, but wouldn't be able to move in for about 45 days. I told him I knew he was going to play with other girls, but begged him to not bring them home overnight until I could get out. It just hurt too much. One night I came home and heard giggling in his room. I was staying in a room next to his. I knew it was her. I texted him, asking why he couldn't just wait a little longer because he knew he was destroying me. He texted back, insisting that no one was there and I was crazy. Later, I heard moaning and gasping. Long story short, I saw her in the hallway the next morning. She smirked at me. I moved out 2 weeks early when my place opened up unexpectedly. He married the girl, but still toyed with my emotions up until the actual wedding. Whenever they had problems, he'd always come back, talking about second chances and how we were made for one another. I'm a happily married woman now, living in a wonderful city. I have a dog and nice apartment. I'm still not sure I'll ever recover from the rage and pain that man put me through. Just a quick PSA side rant here. Polyamorous relationships are definitely not for everyone. It involves a lot of communication between partners. For scumbags like this guy, it was an excuse to cheat. That's not how it goes for everyone. For people who are actually poly or part of a polycule, they're way happier with their partners because they're willing to have these conversations and not go behind each other's backs. It's all about setting and respecting boundaries. On my birthday, I got sick so I couldn't go out and celebrate, but my now ex-wife had arranged a big celebration with lots of friends, so of course she went out because it's crappy to cancel at the last minute on so many people. Anyway, I just went to bed and slept. 2 a.m. rolls around and she drunkenly climbs into bed, which wakes me up, but she didn't notice, and started texting and trying to take nude pictures, seriously, to guys. I saw because I was awake, took the phone from her, went through everything. She had multiple dating apps, was texting as many as 20 other guys and sending them naked pictures. All of them were taken while I was at home, either in another room or sleeping. The next 30 minutes were her sitting in silence and me packing my stuff to go to a hotel for the weekend. And then the following few weeks were spent with her telling me it was all my fault. We're not together anymore, clearly. I cracked the plaster on the wall with the back of my head. She said she was sorry, so sorry, that she didn't want it to end things between us. I told her to leave. She eventually did. That was the first time we broke up. Strangely, the others weren't as bad because I had already been through it. Still bad, but the final straw made it very easy to walk away. I worked for a few months, saved everything I could, then moved across the country. The last text I got from her was, "Where are you? We need to talk. I'm coming over. Everyone's telling me you moved, but I know they're lying. I never have snappy comebacks and I never get revenge. But tapping the word California into my cheapy Nokia and then sending it from the sunny streets of Venice to the icy winter frozen wasteland of Minnesota is one of the best feelings I've ever had after being hurt. It all started to get better from there. She married an idiot knuckle-dragging caveman misogynist. She saw me on a TV show once and sent me a picture of herself in an effort to smooth things over. Time had not been kind. When you're done, you can meet me at the park. I sat there with the six-pack waiting for him. Go on. I literally caught him with her on top in our bed. Anyways, so I waited as he showed up with already a few cold ones consumed. Discussed about how long it had been going on and that I was moving out, and he could keep the bed. He's actually one of my good friends still after 15 years. I just hate drama, so it's better to walk away. Sorry it's not a more exciting story.
Managers. What was the worst case of, "I demand to speak to the manager," that you've ever experienced? I told a customer buying makeup what products she should use on her deeper skin tone, and I'm now racist because I don't want her looking dead at the club. I worked in a high-end makeup store in Manhattan. We saw all kinds of people with all kinds of complexions and concerns, and you learned pretty fast what words work best to cushion the blow for some of the stuff. For example, texture instead of wrinkles, deeper or richer instead of darker. One thing that's always fun to have to explain is what flashback is. On deeper skin tones, a lot of setting powders will catch the light when a flash photo is taken. It'll basically make the person look like they have baby powder on their face, or make them look grey. It's super embarrassing and sort of immediately tells the world that you don't know how to use your makeup. Also, all your photos from your event or night out are ruined, so it's pretty sucky all around. Side note, I'm blonde and I use the Big C mixed with white out as a bronzer. I'm really white. For those of you confused, the Big C is an illegal substance that I can't use the real name of in this YouTube video. I was talking to a customer who had amazing, super deep skin. She was really cool and I was talking to her like a regular human being, and she was looking for a setting powder. Her friend was with her who likes honey beige, so pretty light. She was trying to get her to buy a translucent, which translates to white people and white people who are tan. When I asked her how she's going to use it, she had planned to bake, makeup baking, with it, and that cuts out like 80% of the setting powders we had. This was a couple of years ago, so we didn't have all that many medium-deep appropriate setting powders yet. I explained to her what flashback was, and I told her she could set her makeup with a powder foundation or either of those two setting powders. I told her that her friends might really like some of the other one and tell you to buy it, but with your beautiful skin, you kind of have to use different products. I then said that at some point the makeup industry will realize that there is an entire continent that also needs to set their makeup, but apparently we're not there yet. The customer laughed, she picked up one of the things I was showing her, and said, "Thank you," in the, "You're so kind, I'm so happy I found you today," kind of sing-song tone. Some other customer overheard some of this conversation and told my manager I was telling a customer that we didn't serve people like her. She was apparently yelling at my manager about how racist I was. I was so comfortable in this conversation with my equal that at some point I had said dark skin instead of deeper skin tones. This is apparently a huge insult to some people. It wasn't, however, to the woman living in her deeper skin tone skin looking for some damn setting powder. The woman who complained was a white lady. I was furious. Not only because this random woman overheard something that made me look racist, I was mad because I'm white and color theory and oxidation, a lot of deep shades that look great when you first swatch, but turn orange in an hour or so, for deeper skin tones is a lot more complicated, in my opinion, than for white folks. It took me years to understand the differences in tone and shade and how the products oxidize. It took me just as long to learn how to tell a black woman that 80% of what we sell here isn't going to work for you and have her leave happy, confident, and not disappointed. At Red Lobster, someone grabbed the manager and told him his shrimp was cold, wanted a free beer, and he could get better fish by fishing. This manager was my dad and was meeting us after work and apparently looked like an authority figure since he had a tie on. My dad replied, "That's cocktail shrimp, you moron." I recently had an experience where I was at a restaurant having a meeting for my volunteer work, and a guy mistook me for their waitress. I was walking back from the bathroom when he very obnoxiously huffed and yelled from a distance at me, "Excuse me, can we please get some more silverware?" I just stared at him for a good 10 seconds, dumbfounded because of his tone, before saying, "I don't work here." He immediately turned bright red and his demeanor went back to talking to me like a human. Maybe he had been waiting a long time for silverware, but I couldn't help but feel bad for his actual waitress. No idea why, I have a distinct look that didn't fit in with the waiters or waitresses, and I was wearing a t-shirt with my alma mater on it, while the servers were in black button-ups. Worked for a passenger railroad in Cincinnati, 23, male, wear reflective high-vis shirt and pants. We have to run ahead of our dinner train and flag each crossing, stopping traffic due to a ridiculous rule set by the railroad we run on. Mind you, we go 7 to 10 miles per hour, fairly easy to keep up with. Saturday, I drive up to a crossing with the lights flashing already and start flagging cars across since the train is at least 1 minute away. Middle-aged man drives up to me, stops before the crossing, I wave harder at him to come through, he speeds up beside me and stops on the crossing. "I don't know you're with the railroad. You could just be some yahoo." "What?" "Okay, sir, continue on. The train is right there." "Why should I listen to some young kid like you?" "Because if you don't, you're getting hit by the freaking train. Now move." "I'll be speaking with your manager." As he drives off, I get teed off and throw a flag on the ground. An hour later, I'm back as the train goes the other way. My general manager, 23, male, 6 foot tall, is standing with me helping protect the crossing. Man returns, yells at him, "Who's your manager? I'd like to report him for being a butthole." Boss looks at me, turns to him and says, "I am. Now get the frick off my railroad." Guy gently drives away. In conclusion, older man stops on railroad tracks, is butthole, manager is the bigger, better butthole. As a mild-mannered Northern European, I've always been thankful for when I've had a bigger, meaner person on my side at the workplace whenever I've been browbeaten by a customer. I work in the admissions department at a zoo. We work closely with the membership department and are really friendly with each other. When people purchase membership, they get a card that says their name, how many adults, how many children, if they're allowed to bring in a guest, etc. The card says clearly that you must show ID per card. Sometimes we're friendly or lazy and ask for one ID for the whole group. Well, a week ago, some guy didn't have his ID. I don't know how he drove to the zoo since you need a form of ID to drive, and we told him that without an ID, we can't let him in. The guy got mad and started screaming at us, saying random crap to us. He demanded to see a manager. Good thing our manager, for admission not membership, was on site. She explained to the guy that without ID, we can't let him go in, showed him on the card where it explains to show ID. The guy screams at her and says that because he paid for the membership, he should be allowed to go in without an ID. My manager responded, "No ID, no entry." He asked to see a manager. Her response was, "I am the manager." He then asks if there was someone higher up that he could speak to. She told him, "If you want to do anything, you'll have to speak with membership." So he goes to membership and they told us he was being a butthole and screaming that he paid for it and blah blah blah. The manager for membership was called and because he screamed at him, they denied his entry to the zoo. I worked at an independent chocolate shop that sold various flavors of truffles, brownies, and drinks. We had non-dairy options, vegan options, and nut-free options. A woman demanded to speak with the manager because we did not have any dairy-free, nut-free, sugar-free vegan options. Luckily, the owner literally just laughed and said, "We do have one. It's called water." I have never seen such entitled rage. If said shop happened to be in a weird yuppie or foodie type of area, I bet they could make carob goods for nut jobs like this woman. Fake chocolate with fake sugar and charge considerably more than normal for it because it's specialty. Even if they tasted freaking horrible, fad dieters would buy them up in a heartbeat. What in Thor's name does that girl eat if she can't eat dairy, nuts, sugar, and has to keep vegan? I worked the customer service desk at a grocery store. One afternoon, a guy came storming over after getting checked out and threw a package of beef in front of me. He starts going off, yelling and cussing at me because he was supposed to get a $3.54 discount, but the register only took off $3.53. He was screaming at me that he wanted his penny back and that it wasn't even about the penny, but the principle of the thing. By the time he was through, he had yelled at me, my customer service manager, and our store manager on duty. As soon as I gave him that penny, though, he shut right up and left. Principle of the thing, I guess. I was a shift lead at a GameStop and was the manager on duty with one other associate in the store. We were pretty busy, both the other employee and I were on registers, ringing through our respective lines. Poor guy I work with gets this soccer mum haircut that I knew was going to be trouble, and she's trying to return a new game that had the seal broken on it. Against return policy, can't help you. So lady then gets really upset and demands to cancel all of her son's pre-orders. My guy obliges and is preparing to give her refund and store credit because her son had only paid for the pre-orders with trades. You can't match tenders, so my guy informed her so. That was just it. She was instantly screaming and calling my associate a liar. He literally turns the computer screen towards her and shows her the entries in trade credit, but she isn't having it. "Let me speak to your manager." Dude points to me, I wrap up with my customer, and we trade registers so he can keep helping out. I ask her how I can help, to which she screams her experience at me. I reiterate what my buddy informed her, and that there isn't any way that we can get her cash back. She claims, "Well, I'm gonna call your corporate office and tell them that your policy doesn't apply to me. I've never been treated like this before." To which I happily offer her the corporate number and advise her that telling a corporate customer service line that they believe they are exempt from policy is probably not the best strategy. Woman gets red in the face and starts looking around the store, and God forbid the poor man, the old manager, walks in. He does not work there anymore, but the woman recognizes him from his time at the store. She begins to accuse me of lying to her because she knows that he is the real manager and that he can be of help to her. Nope, dude is just trying to stop. She ended up just leaving in a huff. There is a fairly well-used GIF of Homer Simpson shrinking into a hedge. I choose to believe that the old manager did this into the shelves of GameStop when he heard the conversation. Yikes. Worked front desk of a hotel. Had a woman throw a gosh darn tantrum because the state we were in charged a 6% room tax. She demanded that I remove the tax. I told her that we had no control over taxes. She still wouldn't accept the reality of taxes, so I printed off the contact information on her state representative and told her to direct her complaints to them. She did not like that at all. She started screaming, so I got my manager. My manager said basically what I said, that we cannot legally remove a tax. So the woman grabbed the bowl of mints from the counter and threw it at my head and stormed out. We had her credit card on file and charged her for the full amount. I had a regular repeat guest get upset because the room she normally stayed in was booked prior to her check-in and wouldn't be free for a few days. I apologized and promised her the room once it opened up. She got really angry and started demanding that I make the guest that had been in the room for a few days move because that room was her room. I continued apologizing and telling her that she'd get it in a few days. She asked to speak to my manager and yelled at my manager that just because I was pretty didn't mean that I knew what I was talking about and I should be let go. My manager ended up giving the guest the same information I had given her and telling the guest that I wouldn't be fired as I had excellent customer service skills. Weirdest complaint, insult, compliment ever. I had a woman call in to tell me that she had spent too little on an ice cream cone. We had a special that was like 2 scoops in a waffle cone for $5, and for some reason she only got 1 scoop and said she didn't know about the special, despite there being signs all over the shop about it. She claimed that my worker didn't offer it to her. I didn't focus on upselling at the store, so this wasn't a big deal to me. I apologized to her, but was also like, what exactly do you want me to do about it? This happened yesterday. I'm assuming you ate the ice cream, so you can't return it. She wanted a refund anyway for the inconvenience. I asked if she had a receipt. She said she didn't. I said, no go without a receipt. She said she didn't get one at checkout. I explained to her that in my state we're not required by law to give a receipt for cash purchased food service items. So if she didn't ask for one, tough. She kept pressing, saying she demanded to speak to the manager. I explained I was the manager. She then asked if there was another manager she could speak to. I told her no. I was end of the line, top of the heap. No one else was going to tell her anything different. She huffed and told me she would be by to discuss it in person. She never came in. These stories are giving me flashbacks of all the times people asked for the corporate number, because that happened to me all the time at the car wash I used to run. I was it. Top of the line. The owners cared about the company but didn't give a rat's butt about customer complaints. They were told to never give out information about them. Not numbers, not names, not any other businesses they owned, nothing. So when you got some B-word yelling and screaming at you because you're following company policy to not rewash a $3 car wash and she wants corporate's number, you get to tell her that you are as high as it goes, there is no corporate. Well, do you own it then? And I couldn't lie. Nope, I'd tell her. Then get me the owner's number. They'd always act so smug, like they said the magic words to open a secret cave door. Sorry, but they prefer to remain private. They've trusted me to run this location, to do the hiring and firing, to process the payroll, to order parts and supplies, to deal with the insurance company, to repair broken equipment, and to deal with any and all customer issues and complaints. It'd either end here with them insisting that they would find the owner's information and have me fired because I followed the owner's instructions, or they'd yell and I would call the cops. Sorry, I'm having flashbacks. God, that was an awful time. Obligatory not a manager but. Maybe not the worst, but this was definitely the dumbest I've ever seen. A sign was accidentally left up from earlier in the week advertising men's Levi's as buy one, get one half off. So for 2 pairs it would be roughly $90. The current sale was to get 2 pairs for $70. Had a lady pitch an absolute fit that they weren't ringing up to buy one, get one half off, she was being ripped off, etc. Tried and tried to explain to her that we had accidentally missed a sign, but she was actually getting a better deal at the current price. She wouldn't have any of it and demanded to speak to the manager. Store leader comes out and tells her the exact same thing, but the lady will not listen and is adamant about getting them at the price on the sign. Store leader finally gives up and tells me to just go ahead and do a price override and charge her the extra money. Lady leaves smugly, like she thinks she's just worked us over big time, and makes some kind of comment about how I need to learn to listen to customers on the way out. In conclusion, the lady spent an extra $20 on jeans because she wanted them for the price on an old sign. There's a saying from somewhere that I remember in this instance: people would rather be right than be happy. I guess the victory of this situation gave this person the satisfaction she was missing from her bland and terrible life. When I worked at Starbucks, we, as you can imagine, had plenty of crappy entitled people come in expecting the world of employees, barely paid above minimum wage, who've been awake since 3 a.m. or earlier. We had people blaming us for the fact that they were late for work and were going to be fired. People blaming us for being late picking up their kids blaming us for being late to school. Plenty of, but I ordered a venti, why did you give me a grande? Or, this coffee is cold because I've left it sitting out for an hour, but I want you to make me a new one for free. Or, you aren't being enthusiastic enough after 8 hours of being here and so sleep deprived you don't know what your name is. But the worst/funniest was Libby. Libby was a regular who we really wished wasn't. She was overly demanding and had one of those super complicated half-calf, double soy, triple whip, hold the cream, half the sugar, do a backflip when you serve me types. And she could tell if you got her order wrong and would make you remake it until it was right. She would also steal from our tip jar right in front of our faces. She'd pretend to put a 5 in and then pull out 4 ones, but she'd take out 5 or 6 ones instead. And one time during this little switcheroo of hers, she accidentally dropped a $100 bill out of her wallet. The good thing about Libby was that she only came in once or twice a week, but that meant that we were the ones who had to find this $100 bill for her. She didn't notice it for a few hours afterwards, and when she did, she called in and asked for the manager, and asked her if she had seen it. Since she would have dropped it out in the lobby, where we very rarely went since we were so busy in BOH, we went out to check but found nothing and told her that a customer must have taken it, and that we were sorry, but there was nothing she could do. She flipped her crap. That's my rent money. I'm going to be kicked out of my house. Do you want me to be homeless? You hate me and want me to be homeless, you crappy effers? I hate you, and you're terrible. Go frick off and die. The supervisor came out and gave me the gist of what she'd said while begging me to find this money. There were also some racist accusations since the neighborhood of this Starbucks was predominantly immigrants, and Libby was your standard white liberal until put under pressure. Anyway, so a week passes and still the money hasn't shown up. Libby calls us each day, multiple times a day, to find out if we found her money. Sometimes she yells and screams, sometimes she doesn't. Either way, the answer's always the same: we haven't found her money. So she comes in again and pretends like she hasn't been cussing us out for a week straight, is all happy and bubbly and jokes about losing the money and how she's just so scatterbrained sometimes, haha. She tries to talk me into giving her a free coffee since we lost her money, but I tell her that she has to pay anyway. She grumbles and opens up her wallet, pulls out her card, and out flutters a $100 bill and lands on the counter. We both look at it. She looks into her wallet and after a moment goes, "Oh, that's right. I hid $100 in my credit card slot for safekeeping so I wouldn't lose it. You can stop looking for my money now." That was it. No apologies for the abuse throughout the week, the accusations, anything. I know I shouldn't expect one, but darn, I think she realized that she fricked up though, because she didn't show back up for a couple of weeks. In conclusion, she thought we stole her money after she stole our money, later found her money in her wallet safe and sound. I was busy at Christmas at an old job sorting out wrapping paper, etc. The queue got large, so I jumped on the till. A customer approached and complained about having to pay 5 pence for a plastic bag. The charge just started. She said she wasn't going to pay, so I charged her and asked for the next customer. She moaned that she wouldn't be able to carry everything. I asked for 5 pence. She asked to speak to my supervisor. I said I'll go get him. I left the tills, turned a corner, waited a few seconds, and reappeared, informing her that I was in charge. I once had a customer buy $80 worth of cheap black t-shirts, then complain about the 10-cent per bag charge. What a ripoff! This is ridiculous! Okay, have fun carrying a stack of shirts to your car, you penny-pinching jackass. I was the VP of sales for an F500 here in the States. At about 6:30 p.m., my office phone rang and it was a person from HR asking if I could take a call in which the client was irate and threatening legal action. I get on the phone and quickly realize there is zero chance of making this man happy. And ironically, I'm a big fan of firing crappy clients. The things he was demanding was simply ridiculous, and I politely refused. I also stated that I would personally allow his company out from its contract with no fees or costs. Of course, still not good enough, I eventually hung up due to the screaming and foul language. Long story short, I found out the next day he was arrested for trespassing that evening, while trying to enter our corporate suburban office with 2 guns. But the joke was on him because I worked in our corporate downtown office. I used to work at the concession stand/cafe at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. We had snacks like potato chips and candy, as well as pre-made sandwiches from a local sandwich shop. We only got a certain number of sandwiches for each day, so when we ran out, that was it. This one lady, who was in a wheelchair, came through my line telling me how she was diabetic and needed to eat a meal. I showed her that we had trail mix, candy, and chips, but she absolutely could not eat any of that because she was diabetic. It had to be a sandwich and nothing else. I told her we literally didn't have any sandwiches left, but she just kept repeating about how she was diabetic, and she told me there would be sandwiches. She was being incredibly rude to me, making a scene, and said, "I was told there would be sandwiches," probably about 10 times. By this point, there was a long line forming behind her while she was making a scene. She asked for the manager, so I told her she could step out of line and wait for the manager, but she wouldn't budge. The manager came over and told her the exact thing that I had. She eventually calmed down, moved out of the line, and agreed to have chips and candy. For free. I don't know who the frick told her about the sandwiches, but I want to slap them.
Doctors of Reddit, what was your dumbest r/I am very smart patient experience? RN here. I see some crazy stuff, but one thing that stands out was the time I was admitting a guy to the hospital. I can't really remember what for, but he was about 400 pounds, diabetic, heart disease, you name it. Anyhow, I'm at the computer going over some admission questions with him and his 10 family members who are crowded in the room with him. A few minutes in, he starts complaining that he's thirsty. He needs something to drink right now. So I get on my phone and call the nurse assistant and ask her to bring in some ice water. As soon as the words are out of my mouth, the whole family screams, "No! No water! He's allergic to water!" Well, this is going to be a problem. Turns out the guy had been drinking nothing but Sprite and sweet tea for years because of his water allergy. The next question the wife had was, where are we all supposed to sleep? The whole family, 10 people, were planning to stay at the hospital with him. You can't make this stuff up. Was working at a clinic. I was speaking with a non-controlled diabetic patient about her sugar intake, and she says she drinks a 32-ounce soda every day. I ask her if it's regular or diet, and she replies with, "It's half regular. I let the ice melt first so there isn't as much sugar in it." Sorry, but that isn't how it works. I had a patient who was a completely non-compliant diabetic, smoker, morbidly obese, who had his first heart attack at 45. His blood pressure was also super high. And instead of taking his anti-hypertensive medications, he went to the gym. In the gym, he would sit in the sauna for a very long time, and sweat a lot, and lower his blood pressure by becoming dehydrated. Amazing. I bet he wouldn't listen to a dang thing you said either, because it did technically lower his blood pressure. I have one. I got this from my friend, who is a doctor on the children's ward in a rural hospital. These parents bring in their child whose hair is infested with lice. The lice was visible to the naked eye and could be seen crawling on the child's clothing. While the medical staff examined the child in order to determine a course of action, they discovered the child was covered in a white powder and smelled heavily of chemicals. They asked the parents what were the substances and the smells emanating from the child. The parents said, quite matter of fact, it was 7 powder and the flea and tick spray they used on their dogs on the family's farm. Needless to say, social workers were notified about this case. 70-year-old female tripped and fell 2 days ago. She came in with hip pain, but reports after the fall her nose was bleeding. She had landed on her nose. About a year prior, her dentist had messed up an infraorbital nerve block and caused some swelling in that region, but that was all resolved. This old lady is now convinced her nosebleed after falling on her face is related to an infection from the dental issue a year ago. After multiple back and forth on the etiology of the nosebleed, she became the first patient I raised my voice and put down an authoritative, "No, you are wrong, just stop it." This has got to be the medical equivalent to, "The update you installed on the computer a year ago is making it run funny. Get over here and fix it." I work for an optometrist, and it was the month before school started, and a woman brought in her son to have his eyes checked for the first time. Seems like a reasonable thing for any parent, even he was a little older than usual for a first eye exam. Better late than never, I guess. The mom was well-spoken and appeared fairly intelligent. Everything went as normal, the doctor examined the boy, and ended up prescribing glasses. When the doctor was explaining to the mom that her son had to wear his glasses all the time since he's nearsighted and basically can't see clearly past 5 feet in front of him, and will definitely need glasses for school. For some reason, this caused a switch to flip in the mom, and she spazzed out on the doctor, saying that her son doesn't need glasses and that the doctor is only saying that he does because he wants to sell glasses. She says that she only brought her son in because there was some form for school that needed to be filled out and that doctors are all con artists trying to push unnecessary medications and interventions. The doctor tried to calm her down and explain that he's only trying to help them, but that she was free to get a second opinion, and gave her a copy of the kid's prescription and sent them on their way. About 4 months later, the lady is back asking for another copy of her son's prescription. Apparently, the first semester midterm results were in, and her son failed them all because he couldn't see the board in his classes and needs glasses. Any variation of this, which I get all the freaking time. Me. So how are things going with your diabetes? I don't have diabetes. Then why are you taking metformin and Victoza and whatever? I used to have diabetes. Then replaced diabetes with hypertension/antihypertensives, etc. Or when I ask them what medical diagnosis they have, and they say none while taking a ton of meds. Or when they misname a funny part, prostrate, tendant, uterus, to name a few. Do you take any medications? No. Are you supposed to take any medications? Yes. What for, and do you know what they are? No. Do you think this chest pain could be because of the heart attack I had a few years ago? Well, gee, mister, it sure probably could be. Not a doctor, but I'm a nurse who worked in the OR at a trauma center. Was doing surgery on a 19-year-old who tested positive for meth and cocaine, who was grilling the anesthesiologist about every drug we were going to use in surgery because he didn't like putting chemicals in his body. Gotta stick with that organic, fair trade, non-GMO cocaine. Most of my own stories go along similar lines to patient has chest pain driving a coachload of school children, thinks it's indigestion, swigs bottle of Gaviscon, later diagnosed with a huge heart attack. My favorite ever story comes from a colleague. A patient comes into A&E with abdominal pain. As part of the workup, he gets an abdominal x-ray which shows the problem as clear as day. The colleague has then proceeded to remove, from the patient's rectum, an 8-inch replica of Nelson's Column, the statue in the center of Trafalgar Square, London. On showing it to the patient, the response was, "Oh, that's Nelson. He lives up there." He lives up there? You're just walking around with that in your butt 24/7? I've got 2 stories that stick out in my mind. The first is the mother of a toddler who came into emergency. The kid had cruddy green/bloody stuff coming out of his left nostril and a lot of redness and swelling of only the left side of his nose and the adjacent cheek. Mom was sure he caught a sinus infection and just wanted some antibiotics. Now, I know some kids like shoving whatever will fit into their body orifices, and that this was more than likely given the one-sided nature of his condition, but Mom was insistent that he never puts things in his nose. It took some convincing, but I finally got her to let me take a look. Gave a squirt of midazolam in the good nostril to settle him, then dug with some tweezers through the crud until I pulled out a big ol' button battery. It would have been burning his nose for a couple days. Hopefully he healed up well. Side note, if a kid swallows a button battery, it could do a similar thing to their esophagus. This is an emergency and needs to be dealt with ASAP. I actually sneezed after reading that. Patient had a hard time getting pregnant. Finally conceived but miscarried. Patient has a D&C so she can try again, this time with medical intervention. We monitor her blood to ensure the pregnancy hormone is gone before beginning treatment, but she keeps coming back with high levels of hormone. Docs are worried because she might have some retained placenta or pituitary disorder, and this could be super bad for future fertility. We call her in for a conversation about the hormone levels not going away. After talking together for what might be wrong, they are going to go home and think about further tests. She says, "I need to go. I have an appointment at the weight loss center for an HCG shot." Turns out that she is on the HCG diet. HCG is the pregnancy hormone, and this was after an hour of the doc saying, "We don't know why you have these constant high levels of HCG in your blood and we are worried." Patient inquiring about birth control was adamant she wanted an IED. Take cover! It's a boy! Had a young woman with recurring UTIs that began after a recent partner and with no STDs. Went through the standard questions trying to figure out what could be causing them and eventually found out she had been lubricating with jelly, not KY jelly. The mix-up had literally been a joke on House. It took me some effort to keep a straight face, but we eventually resolved the problem and she stopped getting UTIs. Oh, I have two good ones that come to mind. Clinical pharmacist here, by the way, with one story in the ER and one in the pharmacy. ER physician told me this one. 16-year-old boy presented to the ER with an extremely swollen, discolored woohoo. Apparently, he had been using his mom's insulin needles to draw blood out of his arm and inject it into his own woohoo. He thought that adding blood would help increase his size. His woohoo was terribly infected and he was hospitalized for a week or so. One day in the pharmacy, a girl comes to the counter requesting a refill for her birth control. We pulled up her profile and realized we couldn't refill it because she just got a 28-day fill less than 2 weeks ago. When we asked what happened to the other one, she said she was out. Apparently, both her and her boyfriend were each taking a pill each and was adamant that was how they needed to prevent pregnancy. I can't fault her for being proactive, but I will say that she's doing too much. I'm a chorusman, not a doctor, but I once had a patient tell me that there was no credible research that smoking was bad for one's health. Okay. Optician here. We had a patient who refused to let us use the tonometer, a machine for checking ocular internal pressure to diagnose glaucoma. He said that puff machine gives you glaucoma and we weren't going to pull that on him. He told us his father got an exam and had glaucoma after using that machine. His uncle and brother also had no signs of glaucoma, and after getting the puff test, both people had been diagnosed with a disease. Glaucoma doesn't have any outward symptoms before you start going blind. This idiot just told me he has a very strong familial disposition to glaucoma and refused to be tested for it. Also, puff isn't that bad, guys. Try contacts. Your eyes stop fighting back pretty quick. The puff is a lot better than the old machine. It just hit you on the eyeball with a little ball and a lever. I also have plenty of patients that don't understand family history. I interview patients directly, so we don't have any real paperwork, and too many people can't answer simple questions. Do you or any of your direct family members have diabetes? Yes. Yourself or your family? Alternatively, if yes to family members, they start listing their spouse's family or stepchildren, not how genetic disposition works. Or after getting no answers to diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma, thyroid problem, heart problems, etc., I ask if they take any medications. Yeah, atorvastatin, thyroidazine, metformin, and low-dose aspirin. Oh, so you have everything I asked about. Check. Want some more? Way too many people don't understand presbyopia. As you age, your lens hardens and can't focus up close anymore. Of course, when this is explained, I get a lot of people who believe they're way too young for bifocals. No, 60 is not too young for bifocals. Why doesn't the doctor have to wear bifocals? He does. He's wearing progressives. You don't see the line. Or after trying to get used to multifocal lenses for a few days, giving up and demanding we remake them as single vision, and then getting mad at me again when they can't read with them. I never needed bifocals before. Why can't you just make me regular glasses? Regular glasses always work just fine. Yeah, you used to be 20. Also, you came to see us because you can't read with your regular glasses. In the same vein, these same people complaining about their own insurance to me because progressives are expensive. A line bifocal is covered entirely. Progressives cost a lot. I can't have lines in my glasses like an old person. Then you want progressives. This easily triples the bill. Why are you so expensive? I need to be able to see. Yeah, you need a bifocal. You don't need a progressive, you want a progressive. Insurance pays for what you need, not want. I actually had a guy make me talk to his insurance agent about him needing medically necessary progressives. A progressive lens is never medically necessary. Stop being cheap and listen to what I say. I am not a salesman, I'm a medical professional. Stop acting like you know better than me. 80-plus-year-old patient who was declining with multiple diagnoses and about 3 decubitus ulcers. Daughter was adamant that her father be kept on his strict paleo diet because that would supercharge his healing. She had a stack of diet books. He simply wasn't getting enough nutrition to heal the ulcers. He didn't like the diet at all, by the way. At some point, you kind of have to stop being polite and just tell patients and family members bluntly that you don't have time for this crap and what you recommend they can do and what they want, and just document everything. It happens a lot, but she sticks out. TLDR, gross eyeball stories from eye doctor. I recently had a 30-year-old insulin-dependent male argue he knows when to take his sugar medicine. He had bilateral retinopathy and a severe vitreous heme in one eye, legally blind. Driving a car last eye check 8 years ago, lost glasses 2 years ago. Will need 4 more surgeries, including an inevitable cataract. I had a patient tell me they clean their contact lens with milk because it gets the acid off them. I had a patient ask me if it was okay to look briefly at the sun for short periods of time to improve their eyes. I was amazed and kindly suggested they don't. Had a patient put eardrops in one eye, white part of eye, conjunctiva, scarred over entire cornea and was left with no light perception. Asked me if he should have come in sooner. It had been 4 months. He needs a cornea transplant, which suck and take over a year to recover from. Patient with a retinal detachment told me to put more medicine in their glasses to see better. Macula was off, so they could barely count fingers 4 feet in front of their face. Had a patient wear contacts designed for 2-week daily wear, left in for 8 months. They literally grew into and became a part of the eye. It was repulsive. Had a patient with a 6-year-old translating. Basically, no clue besides eye hurts. Her hand covering her eye. I asked to see the problem. Her eye looked like a shriveled up grape. The optic nerve was holding onto a shriveled up, decayed eye loosely hanging in the orbit. She wanted glasses. Had a lady put jock itch in her eye to cure her suspected fungus. I asked her why she thought it was a fungal infection, and she just had an inkling. They are rare. Cataracts on a 58-year-old male working rooftops for 30 years with no sunglasses. Best corrected vision was count fingers 6 feet one eye, barely seeing better in other. First eye exam. Mad when told he needs surgery and should not drive a car. Had a patient tell me the benefits of using alcohol wipes to clean her privates. Out of the blue. I'm an eye doctor. Had a guy clean his contacts and shower with shampoo because he was convinced it was better. Raging red eye 2 weeks later. Homemade contact solutions are always fun to hear. Vinegar? Salt water? Spit is not cleaner than fresh solution, but please tell me more. Had a guy recently come in because wife made me. Tried with tweezers to remove metal from cornea. Didn't look pretty. I removed the remaining metal rust with the needle and spinning burr tip brush. Antibiotics Q2 hours. Told him to not do that again. Had a patient crush a pill up and put in eyes. It was an eye vitamin but taken by mouth. Her eyes were angry. I had a patient walk in one day with no glasses or contacts. Had full penetrating cornea transplant in both eyes 17 years ago. Last eye exam was 12 years ago. Swore he could see fine. Clearly a transplant graft rejection, one eye with no functional vision, and other was a gnarly looking good eye. I barely got him seeing with glasses on the one eye and can't drive. Uncontrolled diabetes too. Messy. Have had more than one patient argue with me about not seeing right. They either had 2 or more contacts in the eyes or none at all. When they try to remove a contact that is not there, it causes a painful abrasion. Multiple women using non-approved glues to glue on fake eyelashes. Leaks and burns in eyes. Just why? Using fake contacts from the nail salon. Then it never ceases to amaze me when I hear, I just use the same solution until it turns brown or black. Every day. Had a patient using a homeopathic drop to cure itchy eyes. She had pubic lice living on her lashes and they lay eggs and bite. Repulsive. But still convinced the drops cause the lice? Here's a link to a Wikipedia article about crab louse. You pluck the offending lashes out and use a cream to kill the crap you can't see. Thank God that was only once. I have to convince a lot of people to not use hand sanitizer in their eyes. Way too many, actually. I had a patient not taking her herpetic eye drops just because she wanted to pray instead. Yes, herpes on eye. Luckily, I convinced her to do both medicine and pray. I could go on and on. I'm a dental student. One patient in particular is a pathological liar. During one visit, they claimed to have gone to medical school. Next visit was that they did dental army. Last visit was that they had a PhD. The patient will say things like, "Hey doc, do you need me to move my head mesial or distal?" "No, I need you to move your head right." "Hey doc, are these cavities being caused by the anaerobic pathology microbes?" "No, they're caused by you eating snacks all day and not brushing." I'm an OR nurse, and I had an oral surgery patient who had a self-reported history of 250 plus various surgical procedures, a list of 20-some allergies, tons of reported health issues, plus her preteen son supposedly had dozens of health issues as well. She refused to remove her glasses during induction, started screaming and crying about claustrophobia when we put the mask on her face. She also insisted on taking a stuffed animal to the OR. Anyway, getting to the point. She was having oral surgery because she told us, insisted, that the last time she went to the dentist, they told her not to brush her teeth for at least a year. So she hadn't brushed her teeth in like a year and a half. That one was for the books. Pediatric dental is a minefield for I am very smart material. But why does my child have 17 cavities? We don't drink soda or eat processed sugars. All we drink is organic juice and eat those real fruit gummies. Well, fruit has a lot of sugar in it, but the bottle says no sugar added. Right, there's no additional sugar added, but there's already a lot in there naturally. Oh, and we're an all-natural household, so we don't use fluoride toothpaste. And we don't floss because the material the floss is made out of is toxic. Oh, and a lot of times we don't brush their teeth before bed because we're too tired. My favorite excuse for not flossing their child's teeth is, do you know how hard it is to floss a kid's teeth? I mean, I'm a pediatric dental hygienist, so yeah. Where to start? Picture a middle-aged man. His index finger is 5 times the size of the rest of his fingers. It smells, it's leaking pus, there's necrotic tissue, basically one huge infected cancerous finger. He was a firm believer in not taking any sort of medication, including antibiotics or chemo. Died a few weeks later, but he did manage to tell us we were all idiots before he passed away. Patient was a young child who came in with an extremely high blood glucose level. Once she was stable, we did some teaching, and I kept her for a few days for observation. For some reason, every time I checked her, her levels would be extremely high although we were appropriately treating her. Turns out her family would bring her fast food for every meal and hide it in the side table. More teaching and resources were put into place. Had a mom in hysterics because she was convinced that her neighbors, friends, stepson's, teacher's dog has MRSA, so her baby was going to die. It took everything within me to not tell her that most of the hospital staff have MRSA. Just had some amazing people inform me with several scholarly documents that MRSA isn't as prevalent as once thought. It's only about 5% of hospital staff. Thank you, wonderful people. But it took 3 hours for me to calm her down after I called infectious control, her pediatrician, gynecologist, and family doctor. Yes, I had to call all these people. Yes, they laughed at me. Yes, she was beside me the whole time, questioning their judgment. I love my job, but at times it makes me crazy. I'm gonna leave you all with this wild ride of a story. ERRN here, not a physician, but you may find this interesting. Young adult male presents with multiple abscesses on various parts of his body. States he injected his boyfriend's semen into himself trying to get pregnant. He tells one of the APCs he should have gone with his original plan and tried on his dog first. Psych clears him. He's admitted to the floor and gets IV antibiotics. What? I've heard of not sticking your woohoo in crazy, but that dude's boyfriend was sticking a lot more than woohoo in crazy. Wow, that's phenomenal. As a psych doctor, we allow for stupidity, but man, that sounds extra special. So, if psych cleared him, that means they determined he wasn't delusional, which means they somehow figured out with a degree of certainty that he was just that stupid. As someone who has done ER mental health assessment in the past, I would love to have been there to hear the series of questions that led them to, yep, he's actually that stupid.
What are some weird historical facts or events that most people don't know about? Ibrahim I, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, had 280 of his concubines drowned in the ocean because one of them had slept with another man. A slightly more positive fact is that officially the longest war in history was between the Netherlands and the Isle of Sicily. It lasted from 1651 to 1985, 335 years. There were no casualties. Gets posted on Reddit pretty often, but still unknown to some. In 1932, the Australian Army gathered machine guns and went to war against a bunch of emus in what would be known as the Great Emu War. I read this and kind of forgot what an emu was, and then I thought they were those little furry guys in Star Wars, and was super confused for like 10 seconds. Emus are vicious, heartless monsters whose sole reason for existence is to remind us that dinosaurs used to be in charge. Didn't the Wikipedia page have a casualties section at one point, under which was listed dignity? If your grandparents are over the age of 80, they will have lived for 1/3 of US history. If you're 30, you've lived for 1/8 of US history. When the barbarians sacked Carthage, they burned and pillaged pretty much everything but the sanctuary where Saint Augustine was staying. He was on his deathbed, and the barbarians respected him so much for his influence, even though they hated the church, that they decided to leave him alone. There was a gang war called the Great Nordic Biker War, where hundreds of American bikers stole armaments from several Scandinavian military bases and terrorized the streets while killing each other. If I recall correctly, they stole the weapons originally to sell back to the States, but the banditos used an anti-tank rocket to destroy a Hells Angels clubhouse in Sweden. You change a couple of locations and this is the plot to Sons of Anarchy. Let it be known that this sent the Nordic countries-based narrator scurrying to Wikipedia, where he was shocked to learn that the whole debacle was in fact a thing with nearly 100 casualties. During the 16th century, Nicolas Fouquet was the Minister of Finances in France under King Louis XIV. He had the castle of Vaux-le-Vicomte built for a crap ton of money, and had the most rad parties there. 16th century, they still said things like rad then. He invited the king to one of these parties and made it the raddest of all the rad parties, like top 3 raddest in France's history. Looking at all the food and fireworks and fountains and all the bling, King Louis XIV found it suspicious. Where was this money coming from? He was also very much jealous of such splendor when his own castle was mostly empty. So Louis XIV had Fouquet arrested, imprisoned, and then investigated and found guilty. In that order. Arrested by D'Artagnan, the guy who inspired Alexandre Dumas' Fourth Musketeer. And then he ordered the castle of Versailles to be made even more beautiful than Vaux-le-Vicomte. In conclusion, Versailles Castle was built as it is today because the king was jealous of his Minister of Finances, among other reasons. The CIA made a spy cat, a cat that could lurk around and record information, that they sunk several $1 million into, and it promptly walked into traffic. The Soviets had anti-tank dogs they strapped explosives to, that didn't want to run at the tanks for obvious reasons and frequently blew up their own forces. I always heard the Soviet anti-tank dogs failed because they were trained with Soviet tanks, so promptly ignored the enemy and went straight towards Soviet tanks, as they were trained to do. When Fort Sumter was attacked by the Confederates in 1861, no one had gotten killed from the attack, but the Confederates later had a party, for a reason I do not know, and when one of their drunk butts shot a gun, it killed one of their own. That was the only death that occurred during the 3 days of the attack on Fort Sumter. Confederates kept on partying even though they saw the man dead. President Lyndon B. Johnson would have highways cleared out by the Secret Service, get in a car with a 6-pack of beer, and gun it down the highway, downing beer after beer. You can leave Texas, but the Texas never leaves you. The Romans used human urine as mouthwash. Pisterine, anyone? During the evacuation of Dunkirk in World War II, in that moment of despair, desperation, and overall bleakness, on the beach there was a workers' strike by a group of British rail workers regarding overtime. Very strange thing to happen in the face of events. That Henry Ford attempted to build an entire city in the middle of the Amazon to supply his company, and the United States, with a reliable source of rubber. Unfortunately, the entire scheme fell apart, although one can still visit the ruins on the site, complete with all the amenities 1920s Americans could want. Salieri did not kill Mozart. This is a legend. Mozart drank and died in poverty. I heard also that it was a myth that he died in poverty and had a pauper's burial. Apparently, a lot of money was spent on his funeral as well. 10-minute lobotomies. 2 methods were used. Either you had to drill holes in the head, or the later method that was using a metal pick to hammer through the eye sockets. In both methods, a metal instrument was used to mush brain. Local anesthesia was used, the patient could go home in the same day. The doctor did a couple of thousand of these and could do multiple surgeries a day. Also, because anesthetic was costly, they just stunned the patient with an electroshock therapy machine, which was pretty commonly available. Max Tremmel, a priest on the Winter Walk one day in 1894, witnessed a young boy slip through some broken ice on the River Inn and saved the boy from certain drowning. That boy would grow up to be the Chancellor of the Third Reich. In 1919, a molasses storage tank busted. A wave of molasses, 25 feet high, ripped through the streets of Boston, killing 21 people and injuring 150 others. It is estimated that the tank contained 2.3 million gallons, 87,000 cubic meters, of molasses when it collapsed. It became known as the Great Molasses Flood. They should have called it the Molassacre. London also had a great beer flood. 135,000 imperial gallons of beer destroyed several streets. Not that it's a competition or anything. I would like to note that the massacre both killed and injured more people than the Great Nordic Biker War, proving both that it was a very sticky situation and that even a Nordic biker war is a very mild affair. The Twilight Zone was one of the first television shows to feature a nearly all-black cast on a dramatic show that was not dealing with racial issues. This was all because Rod Serling, who was quoted in saying, "Television, like its big sister, the motion picture, has been guilty of a sin of omission. Hungry for talent, desperate for the so-called new face, constantly searching for a transfusion of new blood, it has overlooked a source of wondrous talent that resides under its nose. This is the Negro actor." The episode was The Tall Big Wish, which was part of the first season of the show, and it was awarded the 1961 Unity Award for Outstanding Contributions to Better Race Relations. Did he just talk like he was introducing the Twilight Zone? Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, America's 50th birthday. Adams's last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He was wrong. Jefferson had died hours earlier in Virginia. Apparently, 3 presidents died on July 4th, although James Monroe was not in the same year. During his travels in Africa, the guy that invented Jameson liquor bought an 11-year-old girl as a forced laborer, and then fed her to cannibals just to see what it was like. He sketched while they ate her. Not really weird, but a fun piece of history that not many people know is about the origin of an announcer calling a horse race. On February 5th, 1927, in Tijuana, Mexico, there was a film being shot at the racetrack. A track official noticed the way a director was using a microphone and a loudspeaker to direct his crew and actors during the filming. The idea came to him that if he had a microphone set up in the steward's booth that led to a set of speakers, he could call the position of horses like a director gave direction. Later that day, he had it set up without telling any of the patrons to the track about it. When people first experienced it, they were extremely confused. Before that, people would keep track of the horses themselves with binoculars and were often unable to get a great view at certain angles. After they got used to it, they loved hearing a race being called, and it became an everyday thing at that small track. Now it's an extremely important part of modern-day racing all across the world, and even people that aren't familiar with the sport know about it. Fidel Castro actually wanted to be allies with America, since they were only 70 miles north and a world superpower, and Cuba desperately needed economic assistance. But because of containment and strong anti-communist sentiment, Eisenhower and Nixon both refused to meet him. So Castro turned to the other world superpower, the Soviet Union, for economic assistance, and Khrushchev welcomed him with open arms. And that's how the Cuban Missile Crisis began. The Roman Senate of the Roman Republic wasn't officially supposed to be a legislative body with authority to pass laws. Officially, it could only recommend legislation to the magistrates, who didn't technically have to obey. However, there was an extremely strong precedent to obey official advice from the Senate, so it almost always was followed during the Republican period. During the Empire, the authority of the Senate was reduced further. It's worth noting, however, that the Senate didn't only issue advice. Outside of legislative issues, they did have other authorities and powers in addition to the immense influence they carried. It's treason, then. In medieval times, the accused often faced a trial by ordeal, where they were forced to stick their arms into a vat of boiling water. If their arm emerged unscathed, it was believed God protected them, thus proving their innocence. They also had a trial by iron up to the 18th century, where you had to hold a red-hot iron bar in your hand and run a specified distance. The hand would then be wrapped up, and you would wait a few days. If your hand or skin was corrupted when the bandages came off, then that was God determining your guilt, and you were hanged. Simpler times. It's a bit more complicated than that. The hand would be withdrawn and then treated and bandaged. The bandage would be removed a week later. If the wound had turned septic, you were guilty. If not, you weren't. The hand didn't have to be unscathed, that is after all what scathing means. This was all managed anyway. The guys in charge of the trial would sometimes allow the water to cool somewhat before the hand was put in. This could probably be managed by payment, or if they liked you more than they liked the accuser. Yes, as a history student, it is always worth noting that where things like this that are shocking to our sensibilities come up, they were often much more nuanced and seldom used than factoids like this would have you believe. Most people didn't want to kill their neighbors, especially ones who were very useful to the community. Something I always like to talk about, there once existed an alleged theoretical state of war that lasted 335 years and 19 days, and was between the Dutch and an archipelago off the coast of southwest England called the Isle of Scilly. What's more, there were no casualties because the Dutch forgot that they were at war with the Isles. It wasn't until a Scilly historian contacted the Dutch about the war in 1985 and received the information that the war was still technically going that a peace treaty was signed in 1986. Can you just imagine if they gathered to end this war and the leaders started arguing about who won? So much so that a real war would break out. It's common practice to wear the bottom button of a vest or waistcoat undone. Sometimes vests are even cut with the bottom edge curving away so that the button is purely decorative. The reason for this is that Edward VII of England was a chonker. He undid his bottom button for gut comfort, and it turned into the style as courtiers imitated him. Relatedly, the fashion of wearing wigs, which prevailed in European fashion for 150 years, started because the French king got bald and needed one. Hernando de Soto is responsible for the collapse of several North American civilizations and the deaths of untold millions of people. He and his band of men were the first Europeans to make a concerted expedition into what's now the USA. He started in Florida and eventually his men made it to Louisiana, with many detours along the way. De Soto dies along the way, but that's unimportant. What's important is that they brought about 300 pigs with them for food because they breed quickly and can live off almost anything. Unfortunately, they also serve as a host for various diseases that humans are susceptible to. Lots of the pigs escaped, reproduced, destroyed farmland, and spread diseases. By the time the next Europeans came to those areas, the civilizations De Soto and his men saw had utterly collapsed, and the population had catastrophically fallen as well. Similarly, the vast numbers of buffalo and passenger pigeons are thought to be the result of the death of North American native peoples and the collapse of their civilizations, particularly the ability to maintain agricultural systems. That's also thought to be tied to a period of global cooling as an entire continent's worth of people stopped using fire to control plant growth and forests expanded massively, resulting in vast amounts of CO2 being pulled from the atmosphere. Magellan is not the first person to circumnavigate the globe. He never made it. He died in the Philippines. There was a 100-hour war between El Salvador and Honduras in 1969. The war caused the death of about 3,000 people. The war was triggered by a football or soccer game. It has been known as the Football War. Other than the whole football part, this conflict is known for having the last actual dogfights between piston-engined, prop-driven fighters. Honduras had the 4, 5, and 5N variants of the F4U Corsair, while the Salvadorian Air Force had some beat-up Corsairs and some demilitarized P-51 Mustangs, which they rearmed and set up. One Honduras pilot even had 3 kills during the short conflict. You didn't have to be ethnically Spanish to be a conquistador. There were conquistadors from England and Germany, but the rules to become one involved Hispanicizing your name and converting to Catholicism if you weren't already Catholic. The sound made by the Krakatoa volcanic eruption in 1883 was so loud it ruptured eardrums of the people 40 miles away, traveled around the world 4 times, and was clearly heard 3,000 miles away. That's like you standing in New York and hearing the sound from San Francisco. There's a tribe in Vanuatu that worships Prince Philip as a literal god. There was a TV show on it where they came over to England to meet him and experienced snow for the first time. It was fascinating. On the Lewis and Clark expedition, a vote regarding what direction they should go was held on the coast of Washington amongst the party members. This vote included Sacagawea and York, Lewis's slave. Thus, because the expedition was funded by the US military, this was the first time in American history where a woman and a black man were allowed to participate in a vote of any kind related to government affairs. Pope Gregory IX called for black cats to be killed, as he believed they are incarnations of Satan. The mass killing of cats increased the number of rats in Europe. The increased number of rats helped to spread the plague all throughout Europe. He also had a steam yacht called the Saucy Sue, which was moored off the coast of the West Indies, in which he hosted the entire England cricket team and the Balinese goddess of plenty. That Blackadder quote probably didn't deserve a place in this list of historical events, but it made me laugh, and hopefully it made you laugh too, listener. Legend holds that the Renaissance artist Raphael died of exhaustion and fatigue due to excessive fornication with his mistress, Fornarina. That sounds like something Raphael would want to be said about him after his death. Tell everyone that I died banging that chick. His buddies Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Donatello all agree to spread the lie. Thomas Jefferson collected so many books in his lifetime that he would go into debt. After the British burned Washington, D.C. in the Battle of 1812, he had sold most of his books to the Library of Congress to replace those that were lost in the fire. Jefferson had spent 50 years accumulating a wide variety of books in several languages and in many subjects, including philosophy, science, literature, architecture, law, religion, and mathematics. The nearly 6,500 books netted him $23,950. The sum is from so long ago that you actually can't calculate its modern worth. We can do those calculations since 1913 when we instituted the Federal Reserve and started tracking inflation. In 1913, that $23,950 would have been worth a little over $600,000. If you use a standard inflation rate of 3% from years 1812 to 1913, it becomes about 11 million. But inflation was probably much higher, especially when taking into account the debt we went into for the Civil War and the Reconstruction, which was over $2 billion in real 1865 dollars. 26th President Theodore Roosevelt was an ardent supporter of William Howard Taft. The two were longtime friends, and Taft was Roosevelt's most trusted cabinet member. When Roosevelt's latter term came to a close, he successfully campaigned for Taft's election to the presidency. However, when Taft began enacting many policies that his predecessor found disagreeable, Roosevelt grew sour toward his friend. He vied for the Republican presidential nomination and failed. He then literally marched his supporters out of the Republican Convention Hall and created a new party. Under this party's new banner, Roosevelt split the Republican vote and ensured Taft's defeat. This leads to the story of the attempted assassination of Roosevelt when he was on his way to give a speech. His 90-minute, several pages long speech was folded up in his steel eyeglass case, and the bullet went through the steel and paper, losing enough momentum that it wasn't able to puncture his lungs. Roosevelt felt the shot, but he saw he wasn't bleeding heavily or coughing up blood, so he figured he wasn't in immediate danger and gave the 90-minute speech anyway. He started the speech by saying, "I don't know whether you fully understand that I've just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." A spiritualist who believed in harnessing orgone energy, as in energy from the human climax, sent Einstein what is fundamentally a nonsense machine for harnessing the energy. Einstein spent an afternoon trying to analyze this thing before sending an apologetic letter explaining that this machine was just nonsense. Albert Einstein could also have been president of Israel when it was formed, but he declined. Gladiators endorsed products like modern-day sports stars do. They also rarely died and had, for the time, incredible healthcare. The costs sunk into a star gladiator were immense. Having them die would be a huge loss. Untrained slaves and animals were a different story, of course. I'd actually like to see a modern gladiatorial renaissance myself, maybe sans animal cruelty and slavery, of course. Medieval combat sports are sort of getting there. Thomas Jefferson had a ram as a pet. He called it the abominable animal. It was aggressive as heck, and Jefferson usually tied it outside buildings he was in, and it attacked a lot of people just walking by it. It even killed a boy. He only had it killed once it started attacking his other sheep. WTF, Thomas. Maybe I've been watching too much Hamilton, but outside his intellect, Jefferson doesn't seem to have had a whole lot of redeeming qualities. The American invasion fleet for the Philippines during World War II was saved from complete destruction by a small support group named Taffy 3, composed of 13 smaller support vessels. The Japanese fleet meant to destroy the invasion force was made up of nearly twice as many larger fighting ships, including 4 battleships, one of which was the super battleship Yamato. The escort carriers, which were merely converted merchants' vessels, could not outrun any of the Japanese vessels. Taffy 3 did not have any guns larger than 5 inches. To put it in comparison, the anti-aircraft guns of some of the larger vessels in the Japanese fleet had similar caliber guns. Yamato alone outweighed every ship in Taffy 3 combined. The battle itself was one of the largest mismatches in naval history. The carriers scrambled every aircraft they had on board, which was close to up to 400 aircraft. The destroyers and destroyer escorts laid a smokescreen for the carriers. One of them made a headlong charge directly at the larger Japanese force to get into launching range for the torpedoes. Other vessels took their example and made similar torpedo runs. One torpedo sheared off the bow of the heavy cruiser Kumano, another crippled the heavy cruiser Chokai. The aircraft repeatedly strafed, bombed, and even depth-charged the fleet. Once they ran out of ammo, they continued to make dry runs at ships so as to distract the gunners from firing on friendly vessels. There were reports of pilots flinging empty Coke bottles, charts, and clipboards at ships. One pilot pulled his .45 caliber Colt and shot at a cruiser with it. The Japanese made several errors in the engagement, including the order of a general attack, which meant each vessel could engage and maneuver freely. This made a lot of miscommunication and confusion. They also misidentified the small escort carriers for larger ones, because of the crap ton of aircraft airborne, and also mistook the small destroyers as heavy cruisers. These errors made Taffy 3 look like the outer elements of a much larger American fleet. Thinking this, the Japanese admiral regathered his forces and retreated. This gave enough time for Taffy 3 to retreat and alert the main American fleet, which had been distracted by another Japanese fleet meant to lure them away. It sailed back and bombed the crap out of the remaining warships of the original Japanese fleet. The stories of heroism and bravery on board the American vessels are almost unbelievable. The story of the battle itself is also quite interesting, including when a single shot from the 5-inch Stinger gun of a carrier managed to cripple a heavy cruiser. In conclusion, American fleet composed of support vessels fought a Japanese task force several times larger than it and won, saved tens of thousands of lives.
What is the quickest way you've seen someone mess their life up? Just a fair warning, there's going to be a lot of drug use and sadness in this one. So, not so much bad as it was sad. This happened around 2006 to 2008. Can't remember exactly when because I was about 11 at the time. I had a friend in elementary school and middle school that lived within 2 miles from me and a CVS between our houses. Her, 12 years old, her little brother, 9 years old, and her mother, about 40-ish, were at CVS picking up a few things and were walking to their car in the parking lot. Apparently, as they were walking, the mother pushed both my friend and her brother away from her. My friend hit her head on the sidewalk and woke up to her brother screaming and crying. What happened was that as they were walking, the mother noticed a car that was slamming on the gas while trying to back out of a parking spot. The car was heading straight towards them and the mother pushed the kids out of the way. Car pinned the mother to the wall of the CVS and she died within minutes. The little brother saw the whole thing happen and has since been struggling with depression and traumatic PTSD since. And my friend got a concussion from the incident, lost her mother, and has never been the same. Sad thing is that the driver wasn't drunk or high or anything. It was a tiny little 80-year-old lady that wasn't used to driving the car and pressed too hard on the gas pedal. Don't exactly know what happened when the police got involved, but my friend has been messed up ever since. This forum has had a lot of comments about terrible people that have done terrible things. Not all bad things happen because of bad people. Sometimes they just happen. I had the pleasure of meeting the kindest person I've ever met. He came from a really snobby and popular family, but he was friends with literally everyone. He would hang out with the outcasts. He would actually come over if you posted online about how you were lonely. He didn't care at all about high school politics. I met him once and he made a significant impact on my life. He was just genuine about being fair and nice to everyone he met. He had every chance to be a jerk given that he was smart, good-looking, came from a wealthy family, but nope. He gave off this huge sense of peace when you were around him. If I had to describe the second coming of Jesus, it was him. A year after meeting him, he ends up missing for 3 days. Eventually, the story unfolds that he was at a party the night he went missing. But he was the designated driver for everyone, so it was odd that he just suddenly left before anyone else did. 3 days later, my brother finds him on an old logging road in his pickup, head blasted off with a shotgun. He had apparently taken shrooms and wanted to meet God. His family found his Bible, and it was filled with highlighted passages about heaven and the soul finding peace with Jesus. I'm guessing that the church he went to had a lot to do with it. It was the kind where everyone affluent and popular goes to, but given that they were disgusting people, they didn't seem to practice what they preached. The evil go to hell, but not us because we are here on Sunday. At his funeral, the pastor had the gall to say he went to hell because he committed a sin by killing himself. That kind of church. I really miss you, Stevie. Thank you for showing me the single bit of kindness I ever found in that town. Not me, but a friend was in AP Chem and they were working with some sodium something and his classmates snorted it as a cocaine joke. He was rushed to the ER and now his risk for nasal and lung cancer is through the roof. His predicted lifespan is like mid-30s, maybe early 40s now, and it was all for a crappy drug reference. A fourth-year neurology resident got fired for attacking an Uber driver. She went through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and was about to finish her fourth and last year of residency, acquired hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt along the way, and blew it all after she physically assaulted somebody. My college roommate hit a patch of wet leaves on his motorcycle and hit the curb. The bike flipped and hit him in the chest. When the cops arrived, he was disoriented and bruised, but otherwise okay. The cops thought he was drunk and took him in. In the drunk tank, he complained that he couldn't breathe. The nurse looked him over and said he was fine. Later, he collapsed in his cell. The cops woke him up, handcuffed him, and drove him to the hospital. When they got there, he was dead. Punctured lung. Suffocated. He was 23 and a senior at a very good college. He worked full-time and paid his own way. He was funny and kind and empathetic. He was supposed to be someone important. You'd think over time I would miss him less, but as I get older, I just think of who he would be as an older person. As a parent, I think of the wonderful kids denied a chance to exist because of the stupidity of multiple officers, and it surprises me the visceral, primal sadness I still feel about his loss. This happened in a 2-week period. A friend of mine lost his kitchen job due to layoffs. Looked in the paper for a job he could get quick so he could make his bills, rent, etc. Finds a listing for a company looking for a driver/delivery person ASAP. He has a car, so he figures it would be a good quick fix. Calls and gets the job over the phone and is told he starts the next evening. Gets a quote-unquote company cell phone and does his first pickup. Turns out it's an escort agency and he's picking up and dropping off the talent. Does this for a few nights and starts getting to know the girls. Turns out they're all addicted to crack. Big surprise. They get the idea in his head that he's doing all the groundwork, so he might as well post the ads himself and get his own phone, and they'll work for him. So we're about a week into this adventure and he's gone from line cook to pimp. Fast forward a couple of days into pimping and he comes to the conclusion that all these girls spend their money on is crack, so why not cut out the middleman and start paying them in what they want? He doesn't know where to get crack, but his kitchen buddies can hook him up with coke. Gets a bag of coke and Googles how to make crack. Yes, really. Whips up a batch of kitchen crack and then is concerned that maybe he didn't make it correctly. So logically, he should try it first before giving it to his ladies. 36-hour crack binge later, he's hooked and proceeds to sell off everything, including the car and phone, in the next few days. I dropped by his place to hang out around day 10. I had no idea any of this was going on. He meets me at the door, explains what he's been up to for the past few days, and says he doesn't want me there unless I'd like to pay and hook up with one of the crackheads in his living room. Strangely, I declined. Last time I saw him, he was cracked out, yelling at people for change on a downtown street. 14 days and his entire life turned to garbage. I was the catcher for a kid in my town who was a nasty pitcher from an early age. At 16 or 17, he could throw 90-mile-per-hour fastballs, breaking balls, whatever. It was a pain to catch, and I had to keep a wet sponge inside my mitt in case I caught one directly in the palm. He was drafted 12th overall by the Marlins and received a $1.8 million signing bonus that he got before he even went to spring training. Ended up blowing over $1.5 million on drugs and partying, developed a coke habit that turned into an oxy habit that turned into heroin. Lost his ability to play, lost his spot on the team and his shot at many millions of dollars. It wasn't exactly overnight, but the dude wasted $1.5 million plus everything he would have gotten had he continued his upward trajectory, and it all happened in about 8 months. My ex-wife had 4 beautiful kids, 2 girls, twin boys, decent job, and an MBA with way more earning potential than she was at. Had bariatric surgery, got obsessed with the attention she received from losing weight, Instagram, etc. Met some guy on this game she played, cheated, tried to make it work, my fault for not ending it, went on a trip for work, met some other guy, quote, fell in love, meth and heroin, landed a surprisingly great job, got fired 2 months later for not performing and being late/sick all the time, double deposited her paychecks at least twice. Now she's awaiting trial for 4 felonies, presumably still doing drugs, and she has no right to see the kids because I refuse to let them see her around that crap. She makes no effort to see them and blames everyone else for her problems. Don't do drugs, kids, or be a self-obsessed ever victim. This kid I know, his cousin gave him a gun over the holidays as a present. So this idiot ordered pizza with his friends, and instead of paying, they robbed the delivery guy. Again, this is after they gave the address and name for the order. So now, because he just turned 18, he's being tried as an adult and faces like 10 years or more for being stupid. We were about 17, and me and my friends went to a beach house for summer. Well, there was a cliff, not so big one, should be around 5 meters high, and one of my friends decided to run and jump without checking how deep the sea was. Long story short, I had a lot of rocks, and he broke his back. He didn't screw over his life, but he lost both of his legs. Justine Sacco, the lady that tweeted, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white, and then got on an airplane. This story is too long to fit in the video, so just Google Justine Sacco and you should get an article explaining what happened. When I was in college, I had a job at a local supermarket. One of my colleagues left at the beginning of summer as she was headed to uni in the autumn. Next thing I know, she's in the papers because she was driving a car while someone was car surfing on it and the guy died. Saw her in the shop a couple weeks after it happened and she looked a mess. I believe she went to prison, but not sure how long for. I used to work at a little diner in Constance Bay, Ontario. I imagine I could find an article about this. Didn't happen to me, but to a customer. I would estimate that it was about 10 years ago now. This post was made 6 years ago. The customer, female, and her boyfriend were out drinking at the local watering hole. There was that bar in the Legion in the little town. Anyway, her and her boyfriend had driven to the bar, and when they left, they did the smart thing and left their car at the bar and decided to walk home. Constance Bay is quite small. Basically, it's a main road that loops around the whole town, and all side roads branch off of that. The main road has a really sharp turn at one spot. So, her and her boyfriend are walking on the side of the road. No sidewalk since it's a little town. Everyone literally knows everyone. As they're walking, a guy hits them. The driver was wasted drunk. He had been cut off at the Legion a while before the incident. Her and her boyfriend were hit so hard they were thrown into the ditch. Her boyfriend was killed instantly and she was severely hurt. She laid in the ditch for a few hours, unable to move until someone driving by noticed a hand sticking up. 911 was called. She had a couple surgeries after. If I recall, they had to put a metal rod in her leg. So, after drunk idiot hits them, he keeps driving and takes the sharp curve I mentioned too fast and ends up hitting the garage of a house on the corner. This wakes up the owners of the house, who didn't think too much of it, as apparently this was a common occurrence. Thing is, the owners of the house were the parents of the girl who had just gotten hit. I remember hearing how shook up and guilty they felt when they found out what happened. So, drunk guy was caught and charged, obviously. I guess he was known in the area. His stupid decision not only ruined his life, but the lives of the girl, her boyfriend, and their friends and family. It was pretty sad. She would come into the diner for breakfast, and I remember seeing the massive brace she had on her leg. Screw drunk drivers. There was a kid I went to school with, we'll call him Jerry, who I thought was a perfectly nice guy. Jerry was kind of known as the flamboyant gay kid in my school. He was good at school, had lots of friends, was well known in the community, and had recently just been accepted to an extremely good college. Just a few weeks ago, Jerry went to a party and intentionally got a 17-year-old kid so drunk and high that he passed out. Once the kid fell asleep, this guy forced himself on him and took pictures of the entire process, while making faces and peace signs at the camera. The kid freaked out when he woke up and realized what happened. The police were immediately called. The police took Jerry's DNA and phone for evidence and quickly found over 150 nude pictures of underage boys from our local high school, and all of the pictures of Jerry forcing himself on this poor kid at a party. Jerry is only 18 and now faces charges for forcing himself on an unconscious victim, forcing himself on a minor, possession of CP, and multiple cases of inappropriate assault. Right now, it looks like he will serve a minimum of 5 years in prison, but it is likely to be more. Apparently more victims have recently stepped forward, so he may be even more screwed than he was before. I can only hope so. People like that deserve life in prison. A few months ago, I had a friend of mine ask me if I wanted to try crack with him. I was busy, so I politely declined. He now has 3 different dealers calling up at the job looking for money. He's totaled 2 cars, only one of which was his. Everyone hates him now because he's always begging for money and lying to everyone, and his mother had him locked up for stealing from her house. We've been watching this dude ruin his life for the past few months, and he won't listen to anyone when we tell him it's obvious his addiction is causing it. At a party with a friend. I didn't know our friends well. Someone offers us heroin and I want to leave. She, on the other hand, has a crush on the guy and wants to stay. She assures me she isn't interested in trying it. I try to talk her out of it and to just leave with me, but no. Plus, I'm starting to get crapped on for being lame and I want out. The last thing she said to me before I left was, "You're a drag and a terrible friend." I told her if worrying for her and my safety made me a drag and a bad friend, that I was okay with it. She died that night. So did he. Batch was laced with fentanyl and they both OD'd. Thank you all. I'm not okay, but those were our last words exchanged. I will always feel there was more that I could have done, the same way I feel that pang when I see a homeless person or there is some horrible tragedy. Just part of the emotions of life. I know I had her best interest at heart and simply didn't have the life experience to know how to handle it past what I did. I did pretty well considering that. This was almost 10 years ago, and I've been through counseling and know it was not my fault. It's just never ever going to be a situation I can feel totally at peace about, and that's okay too. Some things just suck. This one's a lot, so be ready. It took 14 years to get to the point I could write this TLDR, and I appreciate everyone's concern and comments. Please consider donating to your local domestic violence shelter. I was very lucky to have the military keeping me safe and moving me across the country afterward. Very few women have any resources except the clothes they ran out the house with, assuming they got out alive. Extremely late to the party. Take out $35,000 credit card debt for online adult images. Pay the interest by borrowing from a Chicago gang. Not tell his wife he's bisexual before she finds it. take out a big insurance policy on her while she's in Iraq thinking she'll die and he'll have $1 million to pay the card and the gang and live well. She doesn't die in Iraq, so he tries to strangle her while she's cooking dinner. He breaks her hand, but she chokes him out and escapes. He tries to fight police. He then tries to punch judges. Got 2 days for that. But his mama knows the judges, so the attempted murder as the domestic violence and the battery charges are dropped. Then he hides in the woods to avoid the process server for the divorce. So he then threatens in writing to kill the now ex-wife's XO and chaplain, except now it's wartime, so they throw him in the brig for military charges instead of civilian charges, so mama can't buy him free. And in the brig, he brags to everyone about how he tried to kill a sailor by flooding a ship's compartment years ago. So he gets charges of 1 sabotage, 2 attempted murders, 2 threatening murder, and all sorts of lesser charges. Dishonorable discharge, and just got out 14 years later. He managed all this in just 4 months. Source: I'm the ex-wife. The fastest way I screwed my life up was drugs. I got in a bad car accident in 2014 and had a bunch of surgeries and spent 5 months in the hospital. Afterwards, I was an opiate-addicted mess who eventually developed PTSD and was prescribed enough alprazolam to effectively erase about a year of my life. I've somehow managed to zombie my way through college and I graduate this May. My GPA sucks and I don't know if I'll be able to get in the nursing program at MUSC. I've been sober for a month now, and it felt like getting kicked by a whole football team for the first 2 weeks. I laid in a fetal position on the couch and watched 10 seasons of Cheers on Netflix, ate crackers and ginger ale, and I'm somehow still alive. Thanks for all the support. I really appreciate it. It helps knowing other people have had it worse and everything worked out for them. I put a no opiate directive in with my primary care doctor to stay on the safe side. People in my high school who drove like idiots and got themselves killed. Some of them were drunk, but even when they were sober, they did stupid stuff on the road. One guy got impatient and tried to pass a car and plowed into oncoming traffic and died. I remember on the way to a senior skip day celebration, I struggled to keep up with everyone else because they were all doing 100 in a 60-mile-per-hour zone. One girl got plastered and wrapped her car around a tree. One guy fell out of a car because he was drunk and fooling around. And every freaking time, people shed tears and ask, why did the good die young? As if it isn't going to happen to one of the other dozens of idiots driving like jerkwads a few months later. One guy got impatient and tried to pass a car and plowed into oncoming traffic and died. I saved an idiot from this. We're all stuck behind a slow-moving truck or whatever, and due to oncoming traffic we can't overtake. This is life. It sucks, but oh well. Then some idiot starts playing chicken and leapfrogging car by car, barely making it back into the right lane before the oncoming traffic that had been braking hard not to hit him zoomed past. I'm the one behind the truck, with massive, long vehicle notices on it, and then I see 2 things. Him edging to try and leapfrog me and an 18-wheeler in the other lane. Honestly, I could have let him die. Instead, I did perhaps the stupidest thing I've ever done in a car. Right before he pulled out to try and fly past me, I yanked the wheel over and blocked him, brake checked him, and sent him swerving and braking back into the other lane. I got back into my lane about a half second before the 18-wheeler screamed past, leaning on his horn. The dude would have had no chance to pass if he'd been in that lane and would have hit the 18-wheeler head on 100%. As a thank you, he floored it past both me and the truck 10 seconds later on a blind corner, flipping me off as he did so. This was 7 to 8 years ago. I'm pretty sure he's dead by now. My mom's friend's foster daughter was about a month from graduating high school. She was a straight A student and she had a bright and promising future ahead of her. As far as anyone knew, she was a perfect, good girl. But literally the day she turned 18, she disappeared. Her mom thought the worst, like she'd been kidnapped or killed. She didn't hear from her at all for about 2 weeks. The cops were looking for her but turning up nothing. Then one day, she walks in the front door like nothing happened. As it turned out, on her 18th birthday and the subsequent couple weeks, she dropped out of school, got a really ugly tattoo that covers a large portion of the side of her torso, moved in a house with a couple of guys, which it was later found out that they were having gangbangs with her every day, blew a bunch of money on drugs. Then, when her mother yelled at her for making her worry and for doing so much stupid crap, she freaked out on her mom and left again that same day, disappearing for another several weeks. She came back to collect some of her things and decided she was moving across the country to live with her crackhead real mother that she was taken away from as a baby and never had anything to do with for her entire life. Today, roughly 5 years later, she has 2 babies from different dads, never went to college, and works at Walmart. She could have done anything she wanted, but she decided to screw up everything and go partying instead of just staying in school 1 more month. This may not be as bad as some of the other answers, but a friend of mine took out a loan for $250,000 I promise I am not exaggerating this number, to pay for her dream wedding to a guy she had known for 3 months. They got divorced after less than a year and she is still in debt from it. The course of a weekend, he met a girl at a party on Friday, put in his resignation at work, and sent an email to his advisor he was giving up his grad program on Saturday and moved across the continent with a girl he met by Monday morning. Last I heard about him, his friends gathered money to fly his homeless butt home 2 years later, and he's been jobless and crashing on people's couches ever since. So, not a permanent mess up, but I've had 4 friends ruin their life over World of Warcraft. Kind of a happy ending, I guess. 4 very close friends of mine all graduated high school at the same time. They all went to college. I joined the Marine Corps. We were all nerds and were all familiar with MMOs and Blizzard. World of Warcraft had really started getting hot, but there was just no freaking way I could play it. But they all started. This was 2006-ish. Fast forward 8 years. I had finished my enlistment and went to college. Me and 2 of those guys are graduating college together with our bachelors. Another one never went back, and the 4th one had to join the Navy because he failed so many classes that his debt was astronomical and he couldn't get back into school. The culprit? World of Warcraft. These guys were putting in 12 hours a day for years on that game. They all failed, all dropped out, all had to pick up the pieces years later after they got their lives back on track. They're all doing well now. None of us, myself included, will touch MMORPGs. Seriously, if you see your life headed down the drain because of an MMO, make changes. These guys lost 4 years of their lives over essentially nothing.
English teachers. What is the most disturbing story/assessment a student has ever submitted? English teacher here. Had an 8th grade student write a "My life at this moment" letter to themselves that they write at the beginning of the year and read to themselves at the end. I always have a rule that they get full credit if I can just see writing on it and it's coherent English. Though if they definitely don't want me to read it, they should staple it and I'll just look for writing. I had a girl who went over the top to look, act and sound, and be a boy. She wasn't trans, so I was a bit confused on how exactly she wanted to be viewed. So I just pretended she was tomboy-ish. She was also insanely defiant to her male teachers, and I worked my butt off to build a relationship with her. She wouldn't have it, though I was kind as I could be. Anyway, the time of year came for me to pass back their letters. By this time, this girl had been moved to a digital learning lab and had been isolated from the Gen Pop. I passed all the letters out and found hers had been left unstapled, though I didn't remember reading it or noticing it wasn't sealed. Curiosity overcame me, so I opened it. My heart broke when I read her rather detailed desire to be away from her stepdad by the end of the year, and her goal for that year was to escape the God-forsaken hellhole. Long story short, that letter ended up being used in court to put her stepdad away for committing the unspeakable act against her viciously for many years. I felt bad for her, but hopefully she's been able to move on, though I doubt it. The description was pretty rough of what he did to her. I teach high school creative writing, and I gave an assignment where students had to rewrite a fairy tale from the perspective of the villain or a smaller character, like the giant or golden goose in Jack and the Beanstalk. A young woman asked me if she could submit a fan fiction she had already started, and I said of course, as long as she finished it and followed the instructions. She submitted a tangled fan fiction, but it was actually a story where the prince goes in and commits the unspeakable act against the evil queen, and it was graphic. I had to call her parents, counselors, principals. It was a whole thing, and very awkward. From that point on, I had to explicitly tell my students that I was a mandated reporter and what that means, and that they had to keep everything PG. Last year, a 5th grade student submitted a poem into our fair contest. Every student in the whole school K5 submits something, so they don't really get read. They just hang them up at the fair and slap a first place sticker on half and a second place sticker on the other half. His poem, which I cannot completely remember, went something like this. That is my girl. She's a lot of fun. If something you said tries to steal her, I'll take my gun and I'll shoot your head. With a picture to accompany it. Someone browsing the poems at the fair had a fit about it, and we had to call his mum and have a talk and everything. It was really great when the mum asked why in the world there was a big first place sticker on it. Well, it's good to see that the judges were as attentive as the people putting the poems up. Consistency all round. In a university English class, we had a weekly peer review assignment. One dude in the group I was assigned turned in a story, a fiction about werewolves and college students, best friends out in a pre-graduation cabin in the woods party, and it was bad. His writing style was so terrible and immature. We all ended up messaging the instructor individually to find out how much work we were expected to put in to editing his story. Normally, we would comment on the story, with whatever little corrections may need to be made, but this thing was all run-on sentences and wrong grammar. It was nuts. For example, the friend was running in the woods as the other guy was driving at her as he tried to hit her as the other friends screamed as the werewolf chased the car as he hit her as she rolled on the roof of the car and the werewolf found her body as she was trying to get up. It was brutal. He was taking the class to be a screenwriter. I still feel bad for him, and it's been over a decade. I would like to tell a story on behalf of my high school creative writing teacher, because I know how much she hated one of my projects because she refused to display it with everyone else's. We had an assignment to write a poem from the perspective of a person facing a difficult life choice. We were to display our poem three-dimensionally, however we liked, written on a pyramid, words hanging from a mobile, etc., etc. I decided I wanted to write a poem about a man during the Blitz, who abandons his family in terror and runs out into the night to die in the bombing. The poem that I still remember, word for word, 2 fricking decades later, is as follows. The smile rests upon my face, shows not my fallen grace. You see the hell I was exposed, that caused my fearful juxtapose, caused me to leave my family and save myself in time of need. I am the doorstep to the grave, my hell-bent path forever paved. I then took this clearly deranged poem and scribbled it in black marker in concentric circles around a very realistic plastic skull I had brought in for the occasion. I gave this crime against nature to my very nice, very liberal creative art teacher who wondered why she had chosen to create this assignment in the first place. She gave me an A and refused to display it with the rest of the normal class projects, clearly the best decision for everyone involved. One of my kids was from Mexico and wrote about watching his neighbors get gunned down by the cartel. Because he and his dad had seen it, they told the police and offered to try to help. While they were talking with the police, they let them into the crime scene, and he wrote about his shoes turning red because they got wet with so much blood. It absolutely broke my heart. He was 11 and said that that was the reason his family came to America. All of these remind me of the time when my little brother wrote a story about our cat that got squished by a door. The teacher contacted my mum saying that she was worried if the story was true. We don't have a cat. A kid wrote a whole story detailing exactly how he was going to murder me. He came in with a knife a month later and tried to stab another boy in the back. I hope he's doing better now. When I was in high school, I wrote a hypothetical story about a drowning person. Every detail was written so that it would imply an incoming rescue. The essay continuously was hopeful about the fate of the person. I prolonged the narrative till the end. In the last sentence, I write something along the lines of, the person is just drowning and slipping to the end of the sea, where they would never be found. I'm glad I'm not the only one who scared their teacher by writing this sort of assignment from the perspective of a drowning person. I'm sorry, fourth form English teacher. I promise I didn't have a death wish. Had my kids write a faux cover letter for a year abroad in Australia, in which they, among other things, had to give reasons why they wanted to go to Australia. Here's what one of my students came up with. I'd like to see some wild animals, koalas, kangaroos, and maybe some aborigines. Guy claimed it wasn't meant to be as racist as it looks at the first glance, and that he simply messed up at the construction. And I actually tend to believe it, seeing as how it was an ESL class in Germany, and he really wasn't one of the top students of the class. But then, in another essay, would you rather do an internship or a paid summer job? He said that he'd do the summer job, so he'd have money for gambling, so he definitely was a bit on the weird side. I remember for my English class, we had a project that we were supposed to do over the entire year and turn it in at the end. I had the idea to write a series of horror story vignettes for mine. I did not hold back with the language or graphic violence. I wrote a story about a guy who is very depressed and tries to kill himself, but is saved by a beautiful woman and they get married and have kids. And then one day they're at a mall and a gunman fatally shoots his family in front of him. And he slowly loses his mind through the rest of the story and ends up doing what the gunman did and kills another family and then kills himself. Another story was about a man whose addict best friend goes missing and tries to find him, then ends up being trapped in a torture-like compound, where he is then forced to murder his friend to get out, only to find that the compound was never ending. I got a 100 and the best grade in the class. My teacher said they were so well written she found herself crying and losing sleep over the stories, so she thought I deserved a good grade. I'm sorry, Mrs. Creelman. Had a student submit a paper about growing up with an addict teen brother. He had the room next to her, and sometimes when getting clean, the parents would lock him in his room, and he would have raging withdrawals. She was very young, so I imagine there was a lot of medical care and therapy going on that she didn't know about. She just remembered that her brother was screaming and crying in the next room, and she would sit in her closet all night long, terrified he was going to break through the wall and get her. It was such a heart-rending story, and it made me view what families go through in such a different light. Second-hand account from a colleague submitted during a workshop in an undergraduate non-fiction writing class. Story was about 18 pages and was submitted by a 50-ish male. Talks about a 12-year-old girl who is not the man's daughter but belongs to him and is his wife. Talking about how they like to stroke her and caress her nude body and make her eat things out of her hand. They put collars on her and constantly refer to her perfect hairy undercarriage and so forth. The rest of the class read the story for the workshop and in disgust and horror email the professor, colleague, who immediately cancelled the workshop and contacted administration about the student. The thing is, everyone was so shocked by the nature of the story that no one got to the very last line in which it is revealed that the girl is a cat. Obviously, the student was looking for some sort of reaction, which he got. Abuse, abuse, and more abuse. Assigning anything that asks them to reflect on something personal or write something creative has a high chance of yielding stories about abuse. These stories very likely reflect real experiences. Many a visit are paid to the guidance counselors and school therapists. If you don't work with kids, you might be shocked to learn just how many people are abused in some fashion. If you add in how many kids aren't abused but just have a bad upbringing, it gets really, really depressing. Yes, I thought there would be a lot more funny stories in this topic, but it turns out the key word was disturbing, so here are some stories that shocked me. I hope we all have our eyes opened a little. Now, let's at least throw some levity in here with this next one. Someone wrote a fan fiction of her and Kermit the Frog, and I've not been the same since. Students were annotating old news articles about a very famous axe murderer from the late 1800s. One student includes an annotation about how the article reminded her of her father. She helpfully included his name for me to Google, and yep, that's how I found out my student's dad is literally an axe murderer. Second place goes to a student who wrote from the point of view of the Zodiac Killer for a creative writing assignment. It was incredibly well written. If it hadn't been, it honestly might not have been so disturbing. But being in the killer's head as he ties up and stabs young couples to death? No thanks. Oh, and last week someone submitted a horror story in creative writing. I swear to God, she could be a writer for the Saw movies. The deaths were graphic and gruesome and creative. I had to take breaks while reading it because I'm pretty squeamish. It might get buried, but I need to chime in, mostly in the hopes that this student finds my comment and knows how much his story stuck with me. The first assignment of the semester was to write about life at the university through a sociological lens. This guy who was social, well-liked, in a frat turned in this shocking story. He was writing about how hard his life was, how he had to scrounge for meals from the trash while seeing all the other students eat happily in the dining halls. He described how he'd seen his friends struck by cars on the winding mountain roads on campus. I was so taken back, and I kept reading anxiously to see if the story would take a turn. A squirrel. The kid was writing from the perspective of a squirrel. This kid was a genius. I told him later how impressed I was, and he shrugs in a very bro way, stating, "That's the worst thing I've ever written. If you see this, Matt, that's still my favorite paper by a student." Not an English teacher, but when I was in junior college, I was a TA for a psych instructor, and I read and graded essays. There was an assignment for students to create an experiment where they trained themselves to create a habit by rewarding themselves after the task. Think Pavlov. One male student wrote about his experiment. He chose to train himself to jerk it more often, and his reward was more jerking. And he wrote about it in detail. Very sustainable system, but so weird to submit to your instructor. I have my high school students write a defining moment memoir about a moment where their lives changed in a significant way. I generally see some stories about childhood abuse and things of that nature where I make sure our social work team is aware of their claims. They're getting support, and that's basically it. However, I did once get a story about the first time a girl in my class had smoked Mary J. Except the whole thing was written with the substance anthropomorphized as a beautiful woman named Mary, that she met and took on a beautiful all-night date. This thing was about 3 pages long and graphic. We're talking full anatomical descriptions of lesbian fun times as an analogy for the experience of getting lit for the first time. It just kept going, and it was extremely well written to the point that I was really uncomfortable reading it, and had to put it away. The worst part is, she was super excited for me to read it and came in the next day asking about it. "Did you like it? I'm super proud." And I had to basically say, Yeah, it's super well written, but honestly, I just can't be reading something like that written by one of my students. As someone whose childhood was mundane and drama-free, the idea of having to write a memoir about a defining moment of my life to that point would send me into a blind panic of, what the frick do I possibly write about? Even now, as an adult, I would struggle to pick any one moment that changed my life. I'm right there with you, commenter. Even at the age of 30, I'm not entirely sure I could pinpoint any single defining moment. I like to think that they happen on a day-to-day basis. I like the next commenter's approach to the problem. Freshman year of college, I took a class called Interpersonal Communication. One of the projects was that we had to make a presentation introducing ourselves to the class and talk about the moments in our lives that we found significant and/or were proud of. The bulk of my presentation was about the fact that I was 19 and from a middle-class family in the suburbs of nowhere, and aside from not failing at life up to that point, I didn't really have any major achievements I was proud of. My teacher was annoyed, but I fulfilled all of the requirements, so I think I got like a B. Really though, I would have felt like a jackass standing in front of a group of people talking about basic life crap as if they were accomplishments, right after an older, non-traditional student had presented an entirety of their life, having children, grandchildren, etc. That person had decades more experience and actual life accomplishments to talk about. I was just some dumb kid. I'm still a dumb kid even though I'm 26, but that's life. Basically a manifesto about how the student felt ostracized from the school and how he wanted revenge. This was a community college. He was a freshman. Over the semester, I could tell he struggled, yet he was also insanely talented. Some of the other students in class bullied him in my presence, and let's just say I didn't tolerate that at all. I spent extra time talking to him and trying to help him one-on-one. One day he turns in an assignment talking about his desire to exact revenge for his marginalization. He was triggered when everyone on his floor conspired to trick him to go outside at night and in the middle of winter, and then they locked him out of the dorm. Buttholes. I spoke with him immediately about it, and he assured me it was just hyperbole. Regardless, I did have to notify my supervisor. I also spoke with his RA, but the RA couldn't care less. The student ended up dropping out shortly after this. We stayed in touch for a bit, but after a while I don't know what happened to him. He was probably the smartest student I had in that class, yet he couldn't make it because of his own personal problems and torment from other students. Ugh. I was working with a small group of Year 7 students, and we did this exercise where the kids have to create a story using a randomly assigned setting, character, and theme. So this one boy ends up with a war zone, a princess, and unrequited love. He proceeded to turn these innocuous prompts into a hilariously messed up story. Set during World War II, it's told from the perspective of the Princess of the UK, who wakes up on the battlefield to find German soldiers shooting at her. Suddenly, someone behind her kills her attackers. She turns around to see her rescuer. It's the leader of the Third Reich. In fear, she runs into a medical tent. He is in close pursuit. In the tent, she decides to confront the Führer, but upon locking eyes with him, realizes he's the most beautiful man she's ever seen, falling in love immediately. He, however, walks right past her and kisses a passing nurse. Furious and jealous, the Princess of the UK kills the nurse in a fit of rage, then flees the medical tent, returning to the battlefield before the sad and baffling conclusion to the story. And then I died. So not disturbing as such, but certainly unexpected. I teach, but not English. I had to once write up a middle school student, I don't remember for what, but it was serious since I hate writing up, and they turned in their assignment for that day with none of it done. In its place was a half-page description of all the things their dad would do to them if he found out they were written up again. It started pretty mild, say, take the phone away, to more serious things like no food or water. By the time I saw it, they were already out the door, so I hopped over to the counselor and let them have a copy of it. Not sure what happened after that since it was out of my hands, and I'm not sure if it was true or not. They tended to be overdramatic and stretch the truth in class, but I took it very seriously. I've definitely been more purposeful and welcoming in my interactions with them from here on out. Got to make sure that the classroom is a safe and good place for them. I was the student. We were told to create an invention that'll help the human race. Basically write 3 paragraphs down and turn it in. Several classmates came up with machines to stop cancer, medical equipment, things to help homeless people. I'm at a loss, so I decided to rip off the self-euthanizing machine from Futurama and basically wrote down that you can choose fast, slow, painful, or painless death. It can help people who have painful diseases die for just a quarter. Needless to say, I was put on a close watch list, and I had a counselor until I graduated high school. We have middle schoolers put together a portfolio at the end of the year for all of their reading logs, and the essay they are most proud of, and a revision of their essay that they think they could improve the most. It's a big culmination project that involves a letter at the beginning to the grader where they need to explain what they've learned and how their habits have changed and stuff like that. Easily some of the funniest crap I've ever read in those letters, and I still have pictures of my favorite intros, but the most disturbing one was about a boy who explained in detail that he broke his habit of not doing his reading by reading while he poops. I've been given some pretty gruesome horror story stuff, but it's usually based on crap the students have watched. This week alone, I've read 2 Red Dead Redemption 2 ripoffs, so I'd settle for anything original. Not a teacher, but when I was in 9th grade, a kid in my class wrote a story about a student planting bombs around the school, and a group of students teaming up to defuse the bombs and catch him. It was pretty cool, but it lost its luster when the kid made a bomb threat to the school a week later. Maybe not exactly what you were looking for, but I'm an ESL teacher. One class we were talking about different holidays and how we celebrate them. This one student was trying to explain Mother's Day, but didn't know the exact name of it. When I asked him to explain the holiday so I could tell him the name we use, he said, "It's the day where I pleasure my mother." What things do guys do to impress girls that make them cringe? This might just be me, but talking about how much you work out. Sometimes it's not even subtle. In the middle of a conversation about Harold and Kumar, please don't shout, "And I can bench press like 130 pounds. I just thought you should know." Also, sending a friend over to talk to me for you. I thought that sort of thing would stop well after high school. I'm amazed how many guys my age still do this. Shyness can be sweet, but really? I'm not going to eat you. Also, please don't tell me that, for a girl, I'm actually really cool. Oh, and guys, I know that's not a lot of weight. That's just a random example. I have no idea if the last guy who said that actually said 130 pounds or not. I'm exaggerating. Sheesh. When I didn't have a 360, I played the Mass Effect series at the rec center at my school. In the heat of a battle in ME2, this bespectacled young man sits next to me and informs me that I'm using my sniper rifle wrong. It's okay though, because he's here to help. Actually, people have paid him for his video gaming advice before, so I'm lucky to get it for free. As if that weren't obnoxious enough though, he talked all the way through the cutscene where Legion joins your party. Constant sexual talk. I'm quite open to flirting, sexy talk sometimes, but it doesn't have to be a part of every single conversation. One time a guy was showing me some pictures he took on his phone. As he's scrolling, tons of nudes from other girls pop up in his camera roll. Like, WTF, dude. This is our first date. I don't want to see sketchy pictures like that. At least save them to another album. When they try to impress me with their knowledge without taking my own into consideration. For example, this guy recently tried hitting on me in a parking lot. He then started giving me bad car advice, and it was obvious that I knew more than him about mechanics. I'm a grad student. I've had guys try to explain my own research systems to me. My mathematical models in disease ecology. My next degree will be biology, but I have a math degree. I use a lot of differential equations and dynamical systems. A lot of guys I talk to about it see me as a big-eyed bio major who's intimidated by math and try to help me understand my own questions. Come to art school. We're almost proud of the fact that we have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, the cliché of academic young men trying to lecture women on systems that the women themselves created is actually a very common one, especially on Twitter. Do better, supposedly educated men. Immediately bragging or showing off within 5 minutes of conversation. That includes how much you make, your job, etc. One guy at a bar last week grabbed my arm to shout in my ear, "I had cancer when I was a kid." Yeah, don't do that. Tell me how many girls they've slept with. Most of the time they're lying, and if they aren't, then ooh. Eggplant pics. I'm 37, on OkCupid, and 2 days ago a guy tried to send me one a day after we'd exchanged phone numbers to arrange a date. He's in his late 30s or early 40s. Seriously, dude, we haven't even met. What the frick? When they bash on women, it literally makes no sense, but it's so common. Especially an ex. So tacky. No, I didn't ask about her. And no, I don't care how much of a loose woman you think some other girl is. If you bash other women, chances are you speak in a derogatory manner about me to your buddies. Discuss their muscles, their sexual prowess, how much they can drink before puking, how much they drank last night before they puked. But, the gun show. Does anyone know a plumber? 'Cause these pipes are about to burst. Start rejection flex. Want to see how many push-ups I can do? Sit on my back and hold my protein shake. I actually saw a guy do this and it worked. The girl loved it. The guy was me. I'd try this, but I don't think 0 is an impressive number. Trash talk my significant other as if that will make me change my mind and hop on your eggplant instead. I once had a guy ask me about my boyfriend. When I finished describing him and our relationship, he took a beat and then said, "He sounds like a great person. Why don't you dump him and go out with a 0? It didn't work, but I gave him points for making me laugh a little. Hey baby, have you ever hit rock bottom? He wore a shirt with 2 arrows pointing to his biceps that said, "Welcome to the gun show." Cringe and laugh. I have a shirt with 2 arrows pointing to my biceps that says, "Obama can't take these guns. How hard did your panties hit the floor?" Flaunting their wealth. I'm sure that's a turn-on for some girls, but for me and most people I know, it just screams D-bag. These are the same guys who whine about how all the women they date are gold diggers. No crap, dummy. To clarify, there are so many responses asking what I mean by flaunting. It's not douchey to have money or to spend money on nice things. It is douchey to brag about how much money you make and the nice things you own, to make a big show of spending your money so everyone can see how rich you are, or to act as though being wealthy somehow makes you better than those around you. I'm a college student, so when I see guys doing this, I assume 90% of the time it's their parents' money anyway, which makes it seem even more pathetic. I flaunt my Costco membership because it's my life's greatest achievement. Am I safe? I wouldn't date a guy for his money, but a Costco membership, I would genuinely consider it. I may have detracted a little from serious points, but in fairness, the banter going on underneath all of the posts is very self-effacing and good-natured. Crazy driving. Maybe once I've known you for a while and understand that you have total control of your car, I'll be more comfortable with you driving fast and reckless. But until then, showing me how you can drift around a corner just makes me think you're being reckless with my life. Please stop. The biggest one for me is lying about things he's into just because I said I was into those things. If you've never seen Blade Runner, for example, don't say you have seen it just because it's my favorite film. I can always tell when they're lying about this, and I don't think it's sweet. Another thing is demanding to pay for everything. I appreciate when guys pay, but I like to pay once in a while too. This isn't the 1950s, and I have a job, so let me treat sometimes. I want to clarify that I do appreciate being treated to drinks, dinner, etc. Who wouldn't? It's only when I offer to pay and my date refuses to allow this when I cringe. I don't think this behavior is super common, but I have experienced it with at least 2 separate guys. Just my preference, and it makes me feel good to be able to treat my date sometimes. I once went on a second date with a guy who came to pick me up. I live in apartments and try to be super considerate of my neighbors all the time. As soon as I get in his car, he starts revving his engine super loud. A, I am not impressed by that whatsoever, and B, I'm sure none of my neighbors appreciated the noise either. This was our last date. This goes right along with speaker systems in a car. Please don't blow my eardrums out listening to your crappy music on my first date. When they say, I could be with any girl right now, but I chose you. God bless you. Oh my God, so blessed. When guys give me a resume or tell me why I should date them. I'm real buff, I'll treat you real nice, I'll make lots of money, and I'll buy you gifts. Like I'm some sort of shallow, brainless twit that is looking to hire a boyfriend. I dropped my monster condom for my magnum dong. I don't like loud, obnoxious guys. Sure, if I were at a bar and you're drunk and yelling, that's one thing, but to just be loud and obnoxious at all times embarrasses me. If we're getting coffee, the people at the other end of the patio shouldn't know what we're talking about. Went out with a dude I got set up with. He seemed okay, albeit not my type. But I'm like, whatever, we'll eat and have an alright time. Nope. We get to the restaurant and as soon as our Latina waitress leaves, he starts spewing all this garbage about Mexicans, saying they're lazy and that he wanted a new server. Awful. I looked at him and went, Lamento que te sientas así, and broke out of there. Translated, I'm sorry you feel that way. In conclusion, racism does not make me wet. Racism, not good. Okay, I'm gonna need more notes. Physical assault on the first date, yes or no? Holy crap, I'm so happy I don't do any of these things. 0 out of 0 is still undefeated. Equating their worth or validity as a human being with their car in any way whatsoever. Its make, its model, its size, etc. I once had someone introduce themselves to me as, I'm so-and-so, and I drive a Lamborghini. He was bright, intelligent, charming, and successful, and didn't have a clue about himself. If a guy is trying to impress me, I'm probably too busy being impressed that they're making the effort. Having said that, the last guy to chat me up kept bringing up the fact that he's read all of the Game of Thrones books, and so he's never surprised by the TV show. I failed to see why this was such a huge point of pride, but I guess literacy is never a bad thing. Well, there's our very low benchmark for the evening, gentlemen. Basic literacy. I once had a guy tell me way too many giraffe jokes, but I forgave him because he was hot. I try and avoid giraffe jokes, not just on dates either, because I'm always worried the joke will be way over someone's head, and then I would feel bad. You son of a B-word. 1. For some reason, at the university I go to, it's a really big thing for guys to brag about how broke they are. This is almost always at the bars when they're spending copious amounts of money on drinks. Oh man, I'm so broke. I have no money, and that's why I'm drinking Hams all night. It's not impressive, and coming from a low-income background, it tees me off. No, you're not broke, and if you are, it's only because you're walking around in expensive clothes and going to bars every night. People who are actually dirt poor do not brag about it. Why is this a thing to brag about? 2. Trying to act like they know more about a subject than they really do. People know when you're bullcrapping. I respect people for more humbly saying, I don't really know very much about that, so I can't comment. In the same vein, acting like there's no possible way I could know more about math or science or politics than them because of my chest and hoo-ha. 3. Wow, girls who look like you aren't usually this smart. Good for you. Why would you want to worry your pretty little head with grad school? Negging is not a good strategy for picking up quality women. Move on to the fall-over drunk ones who are barely coherent enough to notice how awful you are if you want to continue these actions. Pictures of your junk. You're gross. Thank you. Unless I ask for one, I don't want your junk in my inbox. I think some men love their eggplants and want to show it off as if we give a crap. I love my member, but I love pooping too, and nobody sends vines of that. The whole, but I'm a nice guy act. If you were really a nice guy, you wouldn't have to tell that. There was this guy at my college for a semester that would lift his shirt and show girls his third nipple. We all thought he had Asperger's, so it was really painful to watch. Was his name Andrew? My friend likes to do that at the bar, and the guy with the glass eye always one-ups him and takes his eye out. I seriously want to hang out at this bar. Constantly call me sexy, beautiful, etc. when we've just met. Example, hey, what's up? I think you're sexy as hell. We should hang out. It makes me feel like a piece of meat and it makes you look shallow. Follow me around the gym and strategically place yourself where I can see you lift. I'm busy, bro. Also, to the guy who found it necessary to do one-armed rows at the foot of my bench with 100-pound dumbbells, you drop it on my foot and I will end you. Not impressive, annoying as frick. Try to sound too intelligent in conversations or text by throwing an excess amount of uncommonly used words. Usually this happens discussing things I like, as if they're trying to one-up me on their knowledge of the topic or impress me with the fact that they like it too. Keyword here is excess. Large vocabularies are nice, genuine intelligence is obvious, but we can all spot those compensating, arrogant ones. Picking up a guitar during a party and playing Wonderwall. FYI, I'm not a girl, but I cringe when guys think that would actually impress a girl. Guys who say they're musicians or guitarists who oh so casually bring their guitars and play some annoying crap not very well. That drove me nuts in college and high school. I remember being really impressed when I started dating a guy who had never mentioned he was a guitarist until months in, and then when he played it, it wasn't to show off, and he was also really good. I married that guy. When I'm at a party and a guitar comes out, it's no longer even up for debate whether this is cringe to do. In fact, for most of my friends and I, there's a very clear eye roll that goes around that room. As a woman of circa 30 with a big chest, I've seen a lot of these. Some of the things that guys think will impress me are truly bizarre, and I can only assume they're ideas they found in some Mars or Venus bullcrap and legitimized by women who act like impressionable idiots as part of their flirting strategy. General alpha behaviors. Yes, you may be stronger than me, but wrenching things out of my hands because, let man do the job, or telling me what I think or should think is not something that will get you under my skirt. Following up on that, aggression and hostility towards others, especially other men. You think I need protection? Okay, fine. You think you need to pound your chest and bare your teeth at every passing male? I'm out. Bad-mouthing other women. You may think that telling me about that one chick who was so ugly and fat will be hilarious, and will suggest to me that I'm not ugly and fat and we can laugh at her together, right? All it suggests is that you're an abrasive butthole. Also, sexism. Yes, there are men who think that dropping remarks like, women should not be allowed to drive, will make me feel so awesome that despite their hatred for all that is female, they will stoop to interacting with me, or something, dunno. Bragging. If you're out doing cool stuff, I will want to hear about it. But cool stuff does not become cooler when you adopt a condescending, braggart tone. I have a friend who travels a lot, and he can always tell you what he saw and why he did think that particular spot was interesting. And he tells you how cool these places were, not how cool he is for having gone there. Whether you're skydiving or playing League of Legends, tell me how great that activity is, not how great you are. Speaking of negative behavior as if it were good, the fact that you got blackout drunk or do drugs or have beaten someone, have hurt someone, slept with a girl and never returned her calls, broken the law while driving, is not a good thing. Quit behaving as if it was a good thing. I can go on like this, but I think I'll stop. One-upping traditionally male interests. So, what did you get up to this weekend? Me. Nothing much, some video games, hanging out with my cat. What games do you play? RPGs mostly. I was playing Skyrim. RPGs are so lame, but I love gaming. I was playing COD with my buddies the other day, and it was sick. This is very annoying, but also just one-upping in general makes me angry. I went on a date with a guy who literally after I said anything, he stated how he was better, or that doesn't beat what happened to him type of thing. You think making me feel inferior is impressive, pal? It's not. At the end of the date, I said I'd say goodbye, but you probably do that better too. He laughed and asked when we could meet again. We never met again. Went on one date with a guy. He'd been an extra in some movie where he'd actually had a line addressed to the main character. Now, don't get me wrong, that's neat and we're seeing the movie after dinner for just that 15-second part. But the guy seriously couldn't talk about anything else unless it was how famous he is now or the autographs he thought he'd be signing after we watched it. He spent the entire meal talking about himself and this 2 days of his life. I only felt a little bad when we watched the movie and his scene had been cut. Tell me they're in the army or a marine. Automatic turn-off. On the other hand, if they don't tell me and it comes up in conversation later, it's not a turn-off. I'm just used to the type that within 5 seconds of meeting them, you know what branch they are in and so on. Many in my comments are getting defensive and saying, "Oh, should I not tell you my profession then? It's my life, you're a B-word," etc. Remember this thread is about what guys do to impress girls, so in that context is what I'm referring to. I can tell the difference if they're doing it to impress me or not. Don't worry. Hey girl, I've spent 4 years dodging bullets for your freedom. Navy radar operator. Milady? Ah, how fedorable. And now, just a quick intermission of comments from men reading the thread for advice. I solve all of these problems by not being able to talk to women in the first place. I'm perfect. Sounds like I just need to get over the whole approach anxiety and I should be set for a good time, judging from the stupid crap my competitors are pulling. Holy moly. Oh my god, the stories in this thread are making me sound amazing. Hello, ladies. Quick, guys, take down notes of everything not to do. I really hate it when the guy is spending a minute looking at his notepad in between every sentence he says. Walking up to a girl who is just relaxing and telling her to smile. Get the frick out of here. It's not cute or endearing. I don't really want to be with a man who's already correcting me and we aren't even acquaintances. Sod right off. Trying to be classy when it's time for adult fun times. It's just creepy. True story, my now husband and I were getting busy in the shower. He was giving me some finger action, and after checking out the goods, he blurted out, you're really starting to blossom. The muffin shop immediately closed its doors until further notice over that little chestnut. I really wasn't into screwing with my creepy uncle that night. Lately, the moron fest for me has been online dating. People with zero social skills. If I message someone, I damn well read their profile first. I try to find some common ground, ask profile-based questions. That seems like basic interaction 101. But so much, "You're really hot," one-liners. Boring. Or asking the random, pointless or ridiculous questions like, "What's your favorite color?" Well, that's a freaking essential starting point for a relationship, isn't it? If I say orange, we obviously can't go further. Or worse still, a really cringy attempt to be all random lols, questions about what we would do together in space with a unicorn and a cheese sandwich or something. Just no. WTF. Okay, this isn't that common, but I just have to throw it out there. What in the frick is up with guys lifting their shirts casually to show their stomachs, usually while licking their lips? I don't care if you have six-pack abs, that just makes you look stupid. Not to mention, it's usually done by guys that don't really have a great pack of abs. Just stop. Number 1. Negging. They assume that not only will it work, but that somehow I don't read books or use the internet enough to know why they're insulting me. It never makes you look good. It makes you look like a pretentious, misogynistic d-bag who gets dating advice from online forums, which assume women are inherently predictable and easy to target. Number 2. Telling me women who are as smart as me don't usually look like I do. Maybe women in graduate school aren't there as decorations. Number 3. Complaining about how crazy your ex or all of your exes were. Bad-mouthing your ex makes me think you have a poor choice in women and will also probably bad-mouth me when I'm not around. Maybe all of your exes are crazy, but the common denominator is you. Number 4. Continuously trying to make physical contact when I'm openly uncomfortable. I went out with a guy and we were supposed to meet a bunch of people for a law school dinner, and at the last minute he just asked me to go to dinner alone. Whatever, I went. All dinner long, he kept trying to get me to drink more, complained about his exes, and kept trying to play footsie with me until I was in a contorted position to avoid his feet. It was awful. Which reminds me, number 5. Do not pressure me to drink more. That's not only disrespectful, it comes off really creepy. What have you witnessed someone do that made you realize he or she is really, really smart? My wife's grandfather. He's a retired electrical engineer with a dozen patents to his name and a long list of recognitions I can't be bothered to remember or name. I always knew he was brilliant, but never realized just how, until one day last year when we were visiting and he got a phone call. Keep in mind, he's been retired for 20 years and is 86 years old. The phone call was from an electrical engineering firm from halfway across the globe, asking if they could fly him out to a site and have him consult on the energy capture of a hydroelectric dam they were building. They'd run into the problem that none of them, all electrical engineers, could solve. They had consulted 3 of the top-related university departments in the US on the issue, and the last one had referred them to him. 20 minutes on the phone and he agreed to think about it. 2 days later, he had solved their issue and written the solution on a single 8x11 sheet of paper, which he scanned and emailed to the company. He said he took so long to write it up because he didn't want to have to fly all the way there at his age. His explanation was so clear I was able to understand it and follow it with no relevant higher education. I spent a year trying to track down an intermittent issue on my car. An older gentleman on the forum had suggested a likely cause, but I disregarded it as the parts had been replaced. Sure enough, he was right, and I managed to follow from that to find the other half of the problem. I'd had a mechanic look at it, I'd spent hours tearing my hair out trying to fix it. Nothing worked prior to that. Respect your elders, folks. One time, my drunk uncle was in jail and needed bail money. And being that my dad was the only one in the family with any real savings, they all looked to him to fork up 100% of the cash. Having been asked, he realized this situation had 2 possible outcomes. 1, pay for his bail and never get the money back. 2, not pay for the bail and have the whole family blame him for it. So my dad decided to throw them a curveball. He told them that whatever the rest of the family raised for the bail, he'd not only match it, he'd offer double what they'd raised together. Nobody offered 1 cent. Blame averted. I'm quite amused by how funny everyone else has found this. I'm going to tell my dad about this later. He'll think it's hilarious too. Depending on how high the bail was, I do understand this, and what a great way to avoid sanctimonious judgment from the other family cheapskates. Sorry, drunk brother. Have a fun night in the clinker. My husband and I aren't sophisticated. At night we wind down by watching Family Guy, etc. Although it's worthy to note, he watches shows about how anything is made or done, etc. He drinks a beer at night after work and loves his old favourite shirt, this flannel with holes in it. Anyway, we're at my in-laws' place where everyone we're possibly connected to are there. A quiz show comes on, and it seems like a good idea to do trivia in partners. I say yes, knowing that we're up against professors, doctors, and hospital directors, and we're going down. Not only did my husband answer all the questions first and correct, he beat everyone. It all came to an end when he chugged his beer and burped really loud. My husband is successful in his field, especially with numbers and measurement types of things, but I never realized how much information he retains. I just kind of thought he was smart about the industry he worked in. My old roommate George is one of my best friends. He's one of the dumbest people I've ever met. We both ordered Chinese food one night and got the same thing, General Tso's chicken combo with pork fried rice and an egg roll. We both got Cokes, we were both walking back from the takeout place, getting a little giddy about eating our food back at our place. We sit at the table and he opens the bag. His face grows stern as his brow furrows. Which one is mine? What? Like which meal? He continued as he looked up at me. Bro, we got the same food, whichever one you want. I know, but which one is mine? The conversation went on for about 5 more minutes before I just took my meal and we watched Adventure Time. Oh no, frick, I misread the title. I'm gonna leave my post here anyway. Here's my other George story. George always tries to give something up for Lent because God is always watching. He told me once after he took a hit from his bowl. One year it was beer, another it was only skipping class once a week instead of 3 times. He lasted maybe 3 days on that one. One year he gave up KFC. We lived about a block away from a KFC/Taco Bell, which he frequented about as much as he got high. Anyway, no KFC for 40 days or God will smite him. Bro, I want to do it to prove myself, you know? So I gave up whiskey and vodka to make it a team effort. We're in it together, type of deal. The next day I come home after class and see him laying on the couch like Kate Winslet in Titanic, with his shirt off, gouging into a box of fricking Popeye's fried chicken from a block the other direction. He saw how disappointed I was. But I'm still good, dude. It's Popeye's, see? He said, wiping the grease from his face with his sock. I had a teacher in high school that using both hands could write a sentence starting from the beginning and end simultaneously. He even split the middle word of the sentence. He also spoke around 5 languages. What the frick?
A witch! Obviously.
Older brother always was terrible at school. I remember him straight up asking why he needed to graduate high school and then again in college. He accepted a low-level job after graduation in marketing that ultimately fell apart due to the company executives screwing up big time. During all of it, he was somehow able to keep a small client and within 7 months of working was promoted to their executive marketing director, making 6 figures. Now he has multiple clients on the side and is always scheming something up. Dude is as hard-headed as they come, but nonetheless a darn marketing genius. Blows my mind how far he's come. I was once in Chinatown and I saw this old Chinese guy with a bunch of groceries. He had tied the bags together by the handle and slung them over his shoulder. He looked ridiculous. The next week I was struggling with a lot of groceries and I remembered the old Chinese guy. Stopped on the sidewalk, tied all my bags together and walked home like the unencumbered dork I became that day. When my friend, who is a prodigy at school and everything he does, chose to go to a music college to learn piano jazz, when he could have been a neurosurgeon or an astronaut. While I knew he was smart before, that made me realize that apart from being good at memorizing stuff, he could also realize that good grades don't mean you can be a doctor or a scientist. They mean you can do whatever you want, prestigious or not, and that he could see what would make him the happiest. In my book, he went from a smart student to one of the great minds I've ever talked to. Carpe diem, jazz genius, good for you. We should all aspire to do the career that makes us happy. There's even the old cliche about it meaning we never have to work a day in our lives. Which is debatable, by the way. Finally, something I can contribute to. Back in college, I had 3 roommates, an engineer major, pre-med, and pharmacy major. Let's call him Ray. Ray met his girlfriend freshman year, and they dated throughout undergrad and PharmD school. Our school had an intense pharmacy program, and we see students working and studying their butts off. Ray's girlfriend always set up these study groups and invited Ray. But Ray never attended and would lie to his girlfriend that he was studying on his own. The roommates and I know what's up. Ray was always in his room playing video games, watching TV, movies. The guy never talked about class, but he attended every session and lab. Every midterm he took, he aced, and that really teed off his girlfriend and pharmacy friends. The crowning moment that I knew this guy was a genius happened during sophomore year spring finals. I was up late studying, and Ray was on his computer playing Counter-Strike. He suddenly got up, went to his closet, pulled out one of his textbooks, took off the shrink wrap, and looked at a page, put the book back in the closet, and resumed playing Counter-Strike. I was like, dude, what the frick? He said he had a final in the morning and forgot a compound formula and had to look it up. I lived with this guy for another 2 years and he never studied, and textbooks were still shrink-wrapped up. Not a person, but my parents' old dog. My mum could get bones from the butcher shop for their dog. They were long enough that the dog couldn't get all the marrow out of the center. The dog figured out that only my stepdad's truck was heavy enough to break them after experimenting with the other vehicles at the house. There was usually a bone in the same spot in the driveway every time I went home. This reminds me of crows dropping nuts on crosswalks. Or the guy who created a machine that would dispense a peanut when a coin was put in and trained the crows to do so. The crows left and bought him a crap ton of loose change. I knew 2 guys in undergraduate who would play mental chess. As they'd passed in the hall, one of them would say, "Knight to Queen 3," or whatever. The other guy would roll back his eyes for a second and then nod to acknowledge the move. Both guys then kept walking in opposite directions. Later that day, when they passed again, the second guy would declare his countermove. A game could last days, and they never forgot where any of their pieces were. Each had a mental image of the board. Sure, they might have been faking, but these guys were always first and second place on the Dean's honor list for all 3 years of my undergraduate. I knew them pretty well. I think the mental chess was legit. Most really good players can do this. Once someone becomes familiar enough with the game, it becomes a lot easier to recognize the patterns. Of course, intelligence is required and advantageous to get good at chess. It's true. They did a study where they had master and up-level players look at chess positions that had been arrived at by an actual game for a few seconds, and then try and recreate the board from memory. They all did phenomenally well, and for the most part could always recreate the board. Then they did the same thing with non-chess players, and they weren't nearly as good. Then they did the same thing with randomly generated board positions that hadn't been arrived at by a game. The masters were still better at recreation, but the gap had significantly narrowed, and they no longer recreated them with 100% accuracy. I was at my desk waiting to make a purchase over the phone, and I mentioned to a coworker that I always have to pull my credit card out. I should have this number memorized by now. Another coworker overheard that and said, "I know your Visa number," and spit it right out. After I got off the phone, I asked him, "What the frick?" He said he heard me say it a couple of weeks earlier. Numbers just stick with him that way. I always knew he was a very bright guy, but that took it up a notch.
I'd ask him very politely not to ruin your life.
I envy people with this sort of eidetic memory so much. I would never forget my many passwords again. Small ambitions, people. Sitting in a best friend's apartment on the East Coast in the mid-1980s. He's working on some code on a prototype Unix workstation that MIPS had given him. He runs his program and it produces an answer, then runs it again and produces a different answer, thinks about it for a minute and pronounces, "The CPU is broken." Right, the CPU is broken. Never heard that one before. Has it occurred to you that… Yes, it had occurred to him. Went through 3 or 4 scenarios, then he pulled out the machine-level debugger and started stepping through the code. Look, right there. The flags weren't updated right in this instruction. Yeah, whatever. He sends an email on the brand new internet to MIPS. Gets a response the next day. "Oh, you have that CPU. We've verified your issue. We will put a replacement in the mail promptly." His CPU was broken. 30 minutes from diagnosis to request to repair. For the layman, coding and debugging can be quite complex, seeing as the process is essentially many different moving components working at the same time. When a bug occurs, such as getting different outputs from the same input as the guy above described, as a coder you assume 99% of the bugs arise from the code, since it's often very prone to failure. If it's not a code problem, then you blame the compiler, or perhaps the operating system you're working on, or a mixture of the OS, the compiler, and the code. Very rarely do you blame the hardware because it's simply very rare for hardware problems to affect the output of a piece of code without it being seemingly obvious that it's a hardware problem. Like in this case. Thus, the fact that this guy's friend was capable of deducing that the CPU was having problems with whatever specific Unix workstation he is working with by only analyzing the inputs and outputs of a piece of code is very impressive. When you sit down for a meeting for work where you're trying to solve a big problem and someone can say, "That's the wrong question, you need to be asking…" People who can say that generally understand the bigger question and all the various variables and factors in play and how everything fits together. It's some next-level action to watch the entire room go, "Wow, we're looking at trees and that guy's looking at the forest." I accidentally got a promotion literally yesterday doing something like this. I'm a contract attorney doing doc review and randomly get an email saying they're going to bring in 20% of people for conversations. I immediately crap my pants and assume I'm in trouble. My initial reaction is, well crap, if I had more frequent feedback I could code documents accurately with better consistency. Sort of pack a parachute for if they ask why I'm screwing up. Turns out the meeting is just a sample of people they want to ask about how management was doing, if we had the right tools, if we had too many meetings, if we needed something. Blah blah, basically just getting feedback about how the project is going. Since I already have my previous excuse on deck, I just sort of blurt it out. The dude seems really interested and takes a bunch of notes. Fast forward to yesterday. I get an email saying they want another meeting. They made me a fricking quality control team leader reviewing and managing a group of like 15 people because apparently I have such a deep insight into the importance of quality feedback in maintaining consistency. In conclusion, in a panicky attempt to push blame aside, I cheat-coded the right set of buzzwords to finagle a promotion I have no business having.
Anybody who can explain highly complex things very simply. It takes an intelligent person to understand it, but it takes a brilliant person to grasp it so fully they can dumb it down to explain it to anybody.
I think it was Feynman who tried to write an introductory textbook on some obscure topic and concluded that more research was needed because he was unable to explain the topic simply enough. David Goodstein asked him to explain the spin statistics theorem in an undergraduate lecturer in the 1960s and 70s. Sizing up his audience perfectly, Feynman says, "I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it." But he comes back a few days later to say, "I couldn't do it. I couldn't reduce it to the freshman level. That means we don't really understand it." This seems to have motivated his 1986 Dirac lecture on spin statistics theorem. I feel like this gives me good cause to blame all teachers in my life for simply not being intelligent enough to explain the subject to me in a way that I understand. Actually, maybe this is a dangerous excuse to give to the less intelligent among us. A kid in 2nd grade already knew algebra. Everyone knew he was smart. For April Fool's Day that year, our teacher decided to be cute and give us a pop quiz, so she went to the 8th grade class and asked for an algebra test, made copies and handed them out to us. Some of the kids were freaking out, and the teacher assured us that we had already went over this. So she left the room and some of the kids are crying. She came back in after a few minutes and said that it was a joke, but she graded the tests anyway. The smart kid scored an 18 out of 20. My dad had a business trip in Seattle that I tagged along on so I could see a soccer match and explore the city. He invited me to go to the research hospital with him one day, and I agreed. They were working on testing some type of cardiovascular tool on a cadaver that they would stimulate blood flow in to test. Seeing my dad, who didn't go to college, barely graduated from high school and lived on welfare with a single mum, and who knocked up a teenage girl when he was a teenager himself, perform surgery on a cadaver using a tool he invented that could potentially save thousands of lives, blew my mind. He had hundreds of patents on devices. I got surgery 3 years ago, and my shoulder surgeon used a tool he invented in the 90s. He's an incredibly smart and hardworking man who got just the right amount of luck to get him where he is today. I like it when you meet someone whose English is imperfect, but you realize they're very intelligent and are able to explain their thoughts. I remember once meeting a Japanese archaeologist who wasn't the best English speaker, but when he explained his research to me, it was absolutely fascinating. There was this dude I worked with ages ago who emigrated from China. The higher-ups would get pretty frustrated with him because he was constantly coming up with clever ideas and interesting new ways to do things, but they just wanted to keep the status quo. Some ideas were decent, others likely were brilliant. Anyhow, his spoken English was downright brutal. His written English was perfectly fine though. Eventually he left, probably out of frustration. Got to plug my dad here. Had some friends over, and just to mess around we asked him the definition of random words in the dictionary. We opened it to the eyes and asked the question of 10 to 12 letter, 3 to 4 syllable words. Not only did he nail all of them, but most definitions were verbatim. When he got to the 10th word he goes, "The verb or the noun?" and we lost our crap. It was seriously ridiculous. We were freshmen in high school and could hardly pronounce the words we'd picked. Turns out he read the whole dictionary over the summer when he was 16 and bored. Guy is still the smartest person I've ever met. Wife is smart. Like 6 languages, fluently smart without breaking a sweat. Has never not done well in school, always gets promoted, etc., etc. But no one in my family saw this because she's an introvert and tries to keep herself dumb so people get her and like her. My family and I are smart. She's next level up. So after we got engaged, family had a get-together. As in cousins, friends, lots of people. As usual, we played some group games. She was reluctant, but I pulled her aside and asked her to try and fit in. She obliged, but was annoyed with me. Started with Pictionary. She schooled everyone in the room. Moved to a bunch of card games with a single deck. Counted cards, knew everyone else's decks, etc. Quiz board game, knew all the answers. Over and over again, she was dominant to the point of silencing my family. It was unnerving for me. A few weeks later, when we visited her family, "Oh, we don't play games with our daughter. She plays to decimate the competition." I wonder if this person's wife went on to be their family's favorite child, as is often the case with partners. Could go either way after that thrashing. Aziz, a 10-year-old orphan boy in the village of Burkina Faso, built his own ukulele. I would play my ukulele at night for children, and one day he came, so excited to show me the ukulele he built so that he could play with me. He built it with an aluminium can, a wooden board, and 2 pieces of metal wire to have enough tension that it played a note when plucked. Granted, you could only play the one note, but I was so impressed with him. Made it that much sadder knowing he would never go to school and that I had to leave him behind. Found out my little brother, age 12, has a legit photographic memory. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan and knows an abnormal amount about the series. Whenever he answers questions about it, he looks and squints a bit. I ask him about it and it turns out he's just reading the book in his head. He can even jump to random page numbers. He also knows a ridiculous amount of world history. I go to him when I need help with that. Sadly, he's adopted and we don't share the same genes. Lawyer arguing in front of the Supreme Court. He cites something from a law book, stating it can be found on page 84, and one of the justices motions to a clerk to get the book. The justice receives the book and tells the lawyer that no such thing is found on page 84. The lawyer responds, "Perhaps your Honor's edition is incorrectly paginated." It was. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.